Chapter 26. General POV. Natasha, alongside Steve, walked into the garage that Tony had been so generous to fill with whatever he thought suited their taste, no matter how bland it might be for some. Natasha had to admit that the eccentric billionaire really had an observant eye for these kinds of things. We're taking that one. She pointed at a stark customized Mercedes-AMG as soon as the hangar-wide range of cars came into view before Steve could let out a word. 1. Steve only chuckled at her assertiveness and gestured with his hands for her to lead the way, which she did with oozing confidence. Driving out of the out-of-scale so-called garage, Natasha had to hit the brakes as they came in contact with Wanda standing in the path of their car. Wanda, is something wrong?
Steve asked a concerned as he saw her just standing there with a friend. Though she didn't mean to, she had been learning to lean more on her abilities for everything she did that it even started to affect her unconsciously, which was why she immediately shook her head in denial as she felt what felt like a warm telepathic wave coming from Steve.
She still had a long way to go to stop feeling the intent of people near her. No, it's not that, she said quickly. It's just that I was looking for Vision. He was supposed to help me out with something. Ever since she learned how to freely spread her energy to compel someone, she suddenly started to feel people's intent around her, and while she was happy with this application of her powers that didn't involve physical contact, it quickly lost its novelty when she found out that it required immense concentration to block those waves of intent out of her head. So she had looked for Vision for help since this was kind of his fault. Oh, Vision? He's not here at the moment. He said he wanted to run a particular lead on his own, so we don't know how long he'll be out. Natasha told Wanda, who finally had a look of understanding for his absence. She wanted to leave the two senior members of the Avengers to go wherever they were going, but then her curiosity nagged a corner of her mind. If you don't mind me asking, where are you guys off to? She asked softly. Natasha looked at Steve, the latter who shrugged in nonchalance, before answering Wanda. We're looking up a trail for the weapons trade with S.H.I.E.L.D. They didn't really keep much from the twins because though they were the youngest in the group sans Vision, they were both in their mid-20s, far past the age where they could be called children no matter how much Steve taught them so. 7. Hearing that, she was immediately hit with an epiphany. Rather than stay cooped up in the compound and wait for Vision to come back whenever, it would be more productive of her time if she tagged along with them. And besides, it could also count as a learning experience. Can I come with you? It's way better than waiting for Vision and training all day with Pietro, she asked. This time, instead of Steve, it was Natasha who shrugged at the triviality of her request. Sure, hop in. Without another word further exchanged between them, Wanda got inside the car and they took off with Natasha at the wheel and Steve riding shotgun. 2. As she drove, Natasha opened up small talks with Wanda even as she expertly swerved through the lanes with uniform speed, much to Steve's chagrin. It's been a while since I watched your training as Vision practically took over it. She spoke with little mirth in her voice. What are you guys working on? I was really surprised seeing you making objects all of a sudden. While she did drop in once in a while, she reduced the frequency of it when she saw how good he was at teaching. She had no choice but to admit that fact, especially seeing how he perfectly copied her style of fighting after 3 spars, even going as far as reducing his weight and muscle density to become a perfect replica of herself. She never said anything but her heart chilled at that moment when he had done that. 5. Well, I didn't know I could even do something like that. The most I have ever done was messing with people's heads and firing off energy blasts. She and her brother had ample time to train their abilities when they were with Baron Strucker, and she even experimented her psychic abilities with a few captives at the time. Yeah, not so innocent. At least that was until Vision literally beat me up telling me to find other ways to make it better and efficient. She totally agreed with Pietro on his statement about the enigmatic synthezoid being hardcore. This time it was Steve's turn to be surprised by Wanda's words. He actually did such a thing. It wasn't his fault for thinking that way since pretty much everyone on their team thought Vision was quite accommodating and considerate of the duo. A mildly disgruntled Wanda snorted as she felt the wave of disbelief and amusement coming off from Steve and Natasha respectively, knowing exactly what they were probably thinking. I can totally see that actually. The sexy redhead at the wheel snickered when she remembered said android's peculiarities when it came to the subject of further evolving oneself as he puts it. Having a good laugh at Wanda's small misfortune, Natasha slightly shifted the focus of the conversation in a way that both people with her didn't notice. So what's your thought of Vision? It was a very simple and natural flowing question given their current conversation, so Wanda didn't put much thought into it and gave them both her honest thoughts. It honestly depends on your initial view of who he is. She started. Sometimes it's hard to understand what he's thinking at times, and those are the moments you realize that he isn't human. The two listeners nodded even as they all waved in body motion as Natasha made a narrow cut that angered some angry and spooked drivers. Sometimes he's just a tease with a very mean streak to him. That's the part of him you want to watch out for. He can be quite vindictive, for the lack of a better word. Natasha hummed in silent agreement as she was a victim of Vision due to that particular character of his. 1. She wasn't suspicious of Vision like she had been at the beginning, but she wanted to know who others. She stole a look at Wanda from the rear view and saw her resting her head against the glass with a small, almost imperceptible, smile that gave her lips the tiniest uptick. Wanda, unaware of Natasha's attention, let out a small laugh as she remembered something Pietro had said that made Vision request a spar with him only to proceed to beating him up despite how much the former tried to run. It's somehow funny when you remember that he's technically only a little over 2 months old and yet he sounds and acts like a middle-aged man, definitely acts more mature than Sam. It seems you like him a good deal. Steve commented, not meaning anything ambiguous with his words except how straight they were. 3. Wanda paused at his words and thought about it for a bit. Steve had been the first person that advocated for them even when they were fighting to kill Stark, and he also proclaimed them Avengers, giving them the best protection he could and giving them a way to atone for their crimes. Vision, on the other hand, despite knowing all what they did, didn't think too much about it and rarely ever brought up anything related to it, and even he did, it was probably during a conversation she most likely started. 1. It was as if all of the things she and her brother, her last family alive, did mattered little to him. All he focused on was how to make them improve themselves, always stressing how unfair and a huge loss of potential it would be if they didn't. He was also the second person after Steve who had asked them how they were coping with their guilt and regret and offered to help them through it. He is a great person. Sometimes I think he gets too focused on a subject and downplays everything else, but despite it all, Pietro and I are truly grateful for meeting him. Saying those words, she couldn't help but remember how she first thought and feared he'd turn out just like Ultron and cringed internally. Natasha and Steve, who both sat at the front, had small content smiles on their faces as they heard that. It just proved that their judgment of his was the same as everybody else on the team. If a particular half-human android had heard what they were saying, he'd probably be stunned and taken aback about how they formed all these opinions of him and what was the exact criteria they used. Humans tend to overthink the simplest of actions, mostly when it affects them in specific ways. 2. Chapter 27. Chapter 27. Vision POV. I left the compound as soon as I received a notification that informed me that I've successfully gained digital access to the entire area around and within the base. The content of the information I had gotten was very wild, in both latent potential and destructive potential if it were to succeed. To be perfectly honest, I remembered little details and key points from the comics. It's hard to focus on small pleasures when going through college with the most stringent courses anyone could take up and also struggling to get into the prison called corporate life. 3. So like the majority of people who grew up with these relics, I only could remember some of the most important events that happened and also the fucked up bizarre ones that just didn't make any sense whatsoever. And also due to the fact that this universe's Earth closely resembled that of the mainstream MCU from my former Earth, yet with a lot of plot holes due to the presence of groups like the X-Men and Fantastic Four, it made it harder for me to even form a solid prediction that had more than a 70% credibility, since the influence of these groups were bound to clash against the others in ways yet unknown. Despite all this, one thing I remembered quite a bit were the few experiments that came after Steve, Logan, and Wade's scientific modifications. Weapon H6. That was the experimental research Ross dipped his fingers in. Based on what they had and the procedures they had in store in case of satisfactory results, I could already see how and why they wanted to make the Avengers obsolete. The research, while being backed by Ross as a proxy of the U.S. military, was conducted by William Stryker and one Dr. Abraham Cornelius, with both of them having participated in the revision of Project Rebirth and the Weapon X program. Weapon H, basically, from what was currently being tested, was trying to fuse the DNA of the Hulk into the experimented subject while also grafting an adamantium skeletal frame into it to create the perfectly invulnerable soldier. 8. I increased my speed further, breaking the Mach 10 barrier, decreasing the time needed for me to get there to mere minutes. It doesn't take After that, irrespective of what the Avengers choose or agree to, they will move to bag Banner up as he is technically considered military property. Having a country, irrespective of which one, gaining unlimited access and full freedom to experiment with Banner's blood is akin to a proven equation for global hegemony. And Ross being at the top of that was a big no-no. I have yet to enjoy this new life and its ever-growing possibilities to the fullest to let something like that happen without doing nothing, especially when I actually have the power to influence a world as big as this. Confirm the identities of everyone in a 5 kilometers radius of the Nevada base. 2. I ignored the chime of the completed task and slowed down my flying speed as I got ever so nearer to the base. A few things were inconsistent with what I can scantily recall about the comics narrative about this experiment. Apart from William Stryker working with Ross on this experiment, the subject used was a mutant, as opposed to a human, who could shed his skin like a snake once harmed to a certain extent. 2. Stryker, Abraham Cornelius, and Ross were all inside the base, with the first two going through a bunch of biological data from their experiments while the latter was in his office, doing administrative work. 1. What approach should I use? Storm in by kicking the front door in and make everything as clear as possible, or sneak in until I'm caught before falling back to option 1. 2. From the perspective of the targeted goal, the probability of completing this operation with the least amount of exerted effort from all calculated possible approach is to navigate your way through as stealthily as you can while retrieving and destroying all the data you've acquired from their servers, at least as much as you can accomplish before you are found out. 11. Well, it takes nothing from how I originally wanted to crash into it if I decide to opt for efficiency. First thing I did was change my appearance to a type that I've never used before after making sure it didn't exist in present time in this Earth, while the next was to go invisible. 2. Dawning on Simon's appearance for my skin setting, I started lowering myself down the middle of the base where the underground experimental facility was built. 7. I easily ignored the heat, metal, and digital scanners on the surface with a little technopathy as I went underground. Extreme caution is advised from this point onwards. Multiple electromagnetic scanners and sensors have been identified. 2. I looked confusedly at the new prompt that came up. Tweak them to ignore my presence. Shouldn't it have registered these sensors when it scanned the whole base? I carefully made my way towards where the subject pods were being preserved since that was my main objective. Notice, failure in completing generated task. Report, most of the sensors and systems from this level are manually operated and archaic in systematic design. Bullshit. I cursed as I casually walked through a door oblivious to the 4 guards stationed there. 2. This new info just made things a little bit troublesome. It means this place will soon turn chaotic as soon as they find out that all their research is suddenly disappearing from their databases. I stood in the middle of an empty room and looked below me knowing I am just a few floors away from my target. The reason why I'm slowing my walk down was to make sure I trip the obvious traps after I've deleted more than half of what I wanted gone, thereby greatly reducing the time I need to spend in this base. I could already feel the tiny vibrating humming frequency of the electromagnetic field below me, and while I can easily offset most of it with a manipulation of my own, it'll no doubt raise a few alarms. No need bothering myself of the inevitable after coming this far. 3. With that I sank through the concrete gravel floor I was standing on and fell down directly to the section where they kept their research subjects. Most of them were nothing more than experimented husks at this point, and even the ones that had some level of brain activity have been brainwashed repeatedly to the point that their brains can no longer differentiate between real and implanted memories. 1. The first alarm blared as it registered an unfamiliar individual in a strictly restricted area, and the rest followed after, drowning the entire base in a cacophony of screaming bells. Truthfully, I felt sad for the experimented mutants, some of which were just kids in their late teens, knowing fully well that this wasn't the end to atrocities like this. 2. I'd ask for forgiveness, but unfortunately we all know I won't get any answer. I would have probably thrown up fiercely had I seen something like this when I was still fully human, but now those raging emotions never go beyond a specific range. I could see the 3 prime perpetrators running towards this floor with full haste, but unfortunately for them, I was just about done with my main objective. Using telepathy to manually dig out any remains of their personality from each of them would take a huge amount of time, which I was low on, so I made the cruel decision on my part and went through the data I had of all of them to know those who were no different from zombies. How far? Data deleted, 91%. Estimated time left to completion, 147. 1. If I knew how to use the Mind Stone's abilities at a high enough level, then this would have been feasible and not as depressing as it was making me. The door creaked open, but I paid the intruders no mind and focused on the information I was processing. I frowned heavily when I saw the results. They were basically all failures, except for Weapon H that had a modicum of success and was still salvageable. I know I was being stupid with this thought of mine, but I didn't really like the feeling I got after I realized that I could take a human's life away with little remorse, and I even contemplated giving Ross and his party up along with all these evidence of their inhumane experiments and let them suffer the consequences for it. But seeing all these was gradually snuffing out those naive thoughts of mine. 10. Chapter 28. Chapter 28-2. The room I was in had become fully packed with armed soldiers, but I paid them no mind as I tried to see if I could at least save the young man they classified as Weapon H. The others were lost cause, with progressive cellular degeneration and extreme physical deformities being the least of their problems. If I had something like biological manipulation, then I would have had some degree of hope in saving them, but not this. You are trespassing in a restricted government military base. You'd surrender now if you knew what was good for you. 2. Weapon H on the other hand had less deformities and his experimental procedures were yet to be completed, but I could feel very little of what I would call a sapient conscience from his brainwaves frequency. I'd have to take him out of this base if I was to have any chance of saving him. Task completed. Data deleted, 100%. This will be your last warning. Step away from the pod with your hands where I can clearly see them. I finally turned around to the group of people I had been ignoring since the beginning for the sake of preserving my tethering sanity that was steadily dangling over the dangerous edge. Ross, being the fearless man he was, stepped forward from the contingent behind me while the others leveled their guns at me. He stood a healthy distance from me before he started speaking. Who are you, and how did you get here unnoticed? Just looking at the nonchalant and composed expression on his face really was pissing me as the seconds ticked by. I know fully well the type of world I was in, but that doesn't mean that I can't react in extreme ways when I see some really fucked up shit. These were all done under your express orders, right? I ignored his question and asked one of my own while pointing at the few pods in this space. We held each other's stare for a few seconds before he signaled his men and they all got ready to rain down fire at any given moment. 1. I don't believe you understand what's happening. I'm asking the questions here, son. And if you don't want to volunteer to be the new paint job for these gloomy walls, then I'd suggest you answer my questions. He said in a very bland tone and raised one finger up, prompting his squadron of soldiers to start releasing the troublesome aliens with their fingers. 4. I've already gotten everything I needed from this base, and being someone who hated meaningless conversations, I made my decision then and there. So what if the others knew? I doubt they'd care that much about me killing Ross when even Banner hated the man with every fiber of his being. If I can kill inconsequential mercenaries for trafficking alien weapons across the continent without remorse, then why should I care about Ross? 4. Repercussions? As if. Your last chance. Outright slaughtering a whole base of soldiers doesn't look good anyhow I twist it, and it'll also break whatever trust I've managed to cultivate with the rest of the team. 3. Sigh. Morality honestly can sometimes be a pain in the ass, but it still wasn't something I was willing to cross so easily. Before any of them could react, a tennis-sized hole opened in Ross' chest caused by an energy beam none of them could react to. Before he fell over, I destroyed his head by firing another one for good measures. Always double tap the boss. 31. The entire base immediately drowned in the ensuing chaos as Ross' cold dead headless body hit the floor. The two scientists had already made the most astute decision they could by running away as soon as they saw the military general's fate. I ignored the bullets that bounced off against my skin and focused on the two frightened fleeing scientists and sent a telepathic wave that was supposed to freeze them in place, but surprisingly it only worked for Cornelius while Stryker only stumbled for a bit before picking up the pace with renewed vigor. 1. I am a guy who prefers efficiency and straightforward solutions above all else when working, so what happened was that he was forcefully yanked back by an invisible force that delivered him to my waiting hands, all the while ignoring the entire base that had gone crazy trying to kill me. 1. I could see some of them bringing in new weapons, but I paid them no mind and only focused on the two pieces of shit in front of me. 2. I didn't say anything to either of them as I plunged both of their minds, digging out the trillions of terabytes of data that their brain housed. 6. 2 sets of memories has been successfully downloaded. Tagging the 2 sets of memories under William Stryker and Abraham Cornelius. You just gotta love the Mind Stone and its frightening level of efficiency. Throwing away the 2 dead husks of a body, I did one final scan and confirmed that there was nobody of interest that needed to be bagged. 6. Finally having enough, I mentally shut down all the telepathic waves around the base, effectively knocking out everyone in a display that shocked even myself. 5. The entire place quietened down with me being the sole person standing. I could do that the entire time? Now that's some terrifying efficiency. 3. I might have added a tad bit more pressure than needed, but it's not as if the Mind Stone tells me what it can currently do. I turned back to face the group of pods behind me, which were all riddled with bullet holes except for Weapon H, which I protected during the whole shootout. Since I have both Stryker and Cornelius memories, maybe I can fix this guy and get him back on his feet. A little act of selfless heroic deeds every now and then won't hurt me. Proceed to assimilate the 2 sets of acquired memories. Hell no. I don't want to have whatever traumatic shit they did permanently plastered in my head. 3. I left them as is, only opting to sift through them when I needed some particular information they had. The steel contraptions that bound the pod broke on its own before wrapping itself around it to prevent it from opening as I lifted it with me and flew out of the base. The only thing I felt from everything that happened in that base, other than disgust and hate, was a fleeting sense of relief when I killed the 3 of them. This experiment would have been the precursor to Ross being the Red Hulk had I not intervened when I did. I'm just content that I managed to put a stop to a major crisis we would have faced in respect to the huge numbers of experimented monstrosities that would have started popping out had it been successful. 3. I flew back to the compound with a pod flying behind me. 1. Chapter 29. Chapter 29. Evading the statewide aerial network and preventing it from registering either me or Weapon H's signatures was something I could do on an almost subconscious level, so I was sure that there was no way what happened could be traced back to me. I didn't ponder on what the team would say when they found out about what happened because I had a rude awakening in store for them if their reaction was less than desirable. 2. I arrived in the compound and immediately took the pod to one of the scientifically facilitated rooms and first started with halting every transfer of data that came and left the room, even the Wi-Fi connection. Filter out every single dreg of information you can that bears any sort of relation with Weapon H from the memories of those 2. It took a few seconds before loads of information expanded in my head, but I didn't have the patience to skim through all of them and just pulled out the most important ones that were mostly connected with Weapon H. 1. The reason for me saving this kid wasn't only based on sympathy or any violent heroic tendency that I felt. What prompted me more to go this far was the potential the young man if I could rouse back his origin consciousness. 17. He would be a great addition to the team if I could get him under me. Am I not worried about his potential as a more savage Hulk than Banner? No, I'm honestly not. 3. Sure, the boy would be very strong if this was successful, but that was what I needed. Strong people. Better yet if I am the one who nurtures him and makes him indebted to me. The cons to this decision would be him going out of control, which is sorta unavoidable due to the Hulk's innate nature, or him not agreeing to go the cliché hero route that most people with superpowers would go. 4. I still factored in a scenario like that in weighing the calculated risk I wanted to take, and the cold logical part of me already had an answer to that in case any of these events unfolded. My answer to that is reenacting what happened to Banner during his phase when he couldn't change to the Hulk. A psychological block, if you will. It was the most efficient answer, much easier than killing him. Not that the latter was impossible. 3. The research had yet to be completed, which means that I don't have to worry about facing a brain-dead immortal Hulk with vibranium in his body. Hell, the kid's grafting was still in its preparation stage. I broke open the pod and brought out the comatose patient inside it and laid him on a bed as I telekinetically controlled all the necessary medical instruments in the room and got to work. From the memories of the 2 doctors, it seems that Ross was more careful this time after his failure with Blinsky, and the Hulk serum was injected through phases so that they could study everything that happened and how it reacted with his mutagen. It's like how Blinsky was first injected a very diluted dosage of the Hulk serum that elevated him to a super soldier before he got greedy and forcefully injected without medical supervision and turned into the Abomination. 1. Ross didn't want that. It wasn't like they also had an infinite supply of the Hulk's DNA. What he had was a diluted version of what they could scrap from Banner all those years ago, which was why he was still hunting for Banner all these years, until he joined the Avengers, that is. I really should have scraped his mind before killing him. That might be my only regret since coming here, but in my defense I just hated the guy. What's happening to him? Due to the nature of his mutation, the negative effects of the procedures he went through were slightly abated, which is why he survived this long. Unfortunately, the level of his mutation isn't strong enough to completely offset it. The X gene was an entirely new field of study that has almost little to no breakthrough to make factual assumptions. He was at most an alpha-level mutant, and that was being generous since he wasn't a polymorph like Mystique. 2. Since the experiments were still a few procedures from its final stages, it's highly possible that he can survive it. It is assumed that his less than active brain activity will likely decrease the success of this operation. So rousing him up is the first step. In front of me were quite a few scans of the different stages of the experiment, which also highlighted the changes in his X genes, but nobody knows what the effect of those changes are. I moved a little closer to the bed to get a good look of his face, and his contortions suggests he's likely between the age of 18 to 21, since there was no recorded birth certificate of him I could find. He also wasn't someone I recognized as being a part of the main cast of either the X-Men or the Avengers. None of that meant anything to me at this moment. I felt the Mind Stone buzz a little as I pressed my hand against his forehead and dived into his head and tried finding his subconscious. It took a while, but I was successful in getting a faint feedback of sorts that was repressed under all the muddled filth in his head. All I could do was highlight the presence of that consciousness in his head a little, since going any further result in a violent reaction between the psyche and its environment. Retracting my hand from his head, I left him for now to let his mind recuperate naturally and started skimming through the intricacies of the experiments and the motives behind it. Incoming stream of data identified. Who is it? Anthony Stark and Steve Rogers. Ignore it for now. They both have probably become aware of what happened in the Nevada base. Unfortunately, I had more important concerns assuaging whatever worries they have. Due to the secrecy of their experiments, neither Stryker or Cornelius were knowledgeable about a lot of things, but from the little they were aware of, I managed to piece together a few things of note. First of all was that this wasn't the only Weapon X program currently going on. Ross was interested in the idea of the program and started a secret branch of it, since he didn't want to risk the propagation of his Hulk serum, so he enlisted Stryker and Cornelius. It had been Stryker's idea to graft the experiments with adamantium, and Ross readily agreed. Deadpool was already running around, but he wasn't who came to my mind as I digested everything. 12. Laura Kinney, or rather currently X-23, if my assumptions of this world's timeline was correct. 6. The reason she came to mind was because she was one of the prominent characters alongside her father and a certain mark when this particular program is involved, not because she was that important. 1. But I can use this. I could be a self-righteous hypocrite and say I wanted to save her from her torment, or simply accept the fact that she might be a nice addition to have alongside the twins and Davis here. 4. Honestly, she wasn't that impressive when abilities were involved, but hey, beggars right? And it's also killing a lot of birds with one stone. It's exactly this type of cold rationality that makes me wonder if becoming Vision is really that great. I couldn't help but sigh. 1. I could be a selfless hero or a selfish one. It all depends on how I wanted to feel about it. Monitor his conditions and keep me updated with every change. Orders affirmed. Now for a long overdue reality check. 3. Degree. Chapter 30. Reasons why I ate. General POV. 5 people were currently sitting around a large table with varying expressions dancing around on their faces. Pietro just didn't know why he was there in the first place, so he appeared relatively relaxed. And as if mirroring her brother, Wanda was currently swiping through images on the holographic table before her, her face as nonchalant as it could be. 2. Sam appeared frozen with shock and disbelief on his face, as if he was yet to process what had just been said. No one knew what Natasha was thinking, as her face had nothing except trained calmness as she lightly tapped the table to a rhythm in her head. Steve's face, on the other hand, was going through a roller coaster of expressions. Shock, disbelief, uncertainty, understanding, and sometimes relief. How could he not react like that when Fury himself had called them before they got to their destination and told them that General Ross was just found dead in his base in Nevada? And guess who just went to a military base in Nevada? Bingo! They promptly made a U-turn back to base, all the while trying to get to Vision to figure out what happened, but they couldn't get through. Not even Stark could get through to Vision. Stark was already making his way here while they waited for Vision to hopefully return from wherever he was. He still isn't back yet. They all raised their heads to see Tony walking into the room at a leisurely pace. Seeing the expressions on their faces, he arrived at an intellectual conclusion. I guess not, he said as he took his seat, and then noticed how differently the twin were behaving. What's up with them? He asked, pointing at them, which made the others look at the two of them and see how calm they appeared. Do you both know anything? Sam asked, since he thought they would at least be affected by Vision's disappearance, given that they spent the most time with the thing. Man? Dude? Pietro shook his head as he shrugged and then turned to look at Wanda, who finally noticed that the whole room was now focused on her. Oh, Vision? You don't have to worry. He's in the compound. Don't know where though, she said lightly before resuming skimming through whatever image it was that she was looking at. And how do you know that? Natasha leaned a bit further and asked. I can feel him, she said absent-mindedly, eyes still on the screen. As if knowing what they were thinking, she continued. I don't know how or why, might be because of whatever that Mind Stone is, but I can somehow sense when he's nearby. At least when he's not actively hiding himself. She finally looked up just in time to see the doors open as Vision in his human guise walked in. Quite a communion this is, he said lightly, not at all affected by the looks of curiosity he was being showered in. I think the correct word there should be commotion. Tony snorted. All seated, they patiently waited for Vision to speak, but it seemed the person in question wasn't going to humor them, so Steve had to break the ice. We heard Ross was dead. What happened there? Though he trusted Vision, at least to a certain extent, he couldn't say he understood his thought process. How could he when Stark and Banner couldn't? There was not a single shift in Vision's person, and the question he already expected. He looked at Steve and answered fluently in his bland and slightly robotic voice. I killed Ross and the 2 scientists who were with him. Why? This time it was Tony who asked. He was the only one who could say with a degree of assuredness that he had a little level of understanding on how Vision thought, since the latter was partly made up of Jarvis codes. The only reason he was this calm was because of that belief he had, not that he cared about the old general's death. He was sure that if Vision killed Ross, then something happened there that prompted such a response, and he was correct. But just not the way he wanted. Instead of answering, holographic images popped up and a series of gasps followed after they skimmed through the surface of the content presented before them. Out of all of them present, surprisingly it was Pietro who was mostly affected as his eyes glanced through everything in front of him at a speed nobody here could read with. Is this? He couldn't finish his words as vision completed it for him. Human experiment. No, that's wrong. Mutant experiments. He said coolly in an even tone that betrayed no emotion. 2. Tony stood up from his seat as his entire focus was successfully stolen by the pixelated display, leaving Steve to ask Vision to expand on what they were all seeing. It's exactly what you are looking at. No filters. Ross and his accomplices' images were elided. Your government was secretly greenlighting illegal, inhumane experiments. Steve's eyes wavered as Vision bluntly said what he dreaded. While he wasn't as intellectually smart like people like Tony and Bruce, he wasn't in any way ignorant or naive. Oh, he knew his country's government couldn't be trusted since the very first day he joined the army, but he at least believed things like these were done by those who had given up what made them human. 1. This. Tony's surprised voice drew back their attention to the files floating around. How real is this? Everyone soon realized what he was saying as they saw pictures and statistical analysis of Bruce Banner and what could possibly be his DNA signature. Ross never gave up on creating his Hulk army, not even after the disaster he inadvertently caused in Harlem. Vision explained. Everyone held on to their breaths as he simplified what they wanted to achieve and the current highlight of the experiments before he stepped in. But why mutants? Natasha, who had been silent since the beginning, finally asked as it confused her a little bit. Because the active X gene in mutants have a higher chance of being fully accommodating of the induced mutation and the grafting procedure. He then added after a slight pause. None have been successful so far. Tony went back and slumped into his chair while the rest were simply too stunned to know how to properly react. What now? Sam asked, still not knowing how he felt about all this. This is no longer about the Accords anymore. Natasha commented. No, it's not. Admittedly, only a few people in power know about this. They are so small that you can't even consider them a minority, but that's not what this is about. The amount of pull something like this will have upon actualization is enough to change the current society into a dystopian era. As Vision spoke, a few random faces and files popped up for everyone to view. Something like this makes the Avengers and the very notion of it look incredibly stupid and hypocritical. Supposed to protect the Earth from outer threats? And then what? Leave the inside to rot and contort into the most revolting yet neatly packaged ball of shit. None of them could say a word to either refute or defend against his words. What could they say? There is a perfectly reasonable explanation for this. 1. Even if this was a secretive-approved program, it still showed how little they cared when innocents were involved. They knew. They had all experienced this firsthand when the council decided to bomb the island of Manhattan, even though they were fighting against an alien invasion and millions were in the city. It wasn't as if dropping a missile on the city would solve everything. It might delay the invasion a bit, but it wouldn't have stopped it in any way. And yet you wonder why Ultron wanted to destroy the world. 36. Degree. Chapter 31. Chapter 31. Reasons why 2. Vision POV. And you wonder why Ultron wanted to destroy the world. They bristled at those words, making me idly think whether they thought I was thinking about that. You should think more about it before you make any decisions, but know this, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to think about. Was there any point in continuing this conversation? I don't think so. Everyone's decisions depends on how they took it, and they didn't take it very well. Personally, after letting myself act on my emotions for a change, I stopped feeling anything towards this. Basically it all boils down to two things, whether I like it or not, and the actions I take are usually based off on which one of those two things I respond to. I left the room almost certain of the choices most of them would make. Unlike what most would think, apart from Wanda and Pietro, Tony was the one who reacted more violently, though he hid it well under that calm facade and suave smile of his. Steve and Sam followed after Stark, but unlike the latter, Steve was quick to accept what happened from the evidence presented. Natasha was the least affected, which is obvious considering who she was. I really don't have the time to think about the Avengers, so I better get moving. I wasn't playing the card of being a beacon of hope for the mutants. I wasn't interested in being their favorites. The reason was simple. The Avengers, as they were, left more to be desired. By the way, they all appeared frazzled because of the Accords, and Ross' death made that abundantly clearer. In a way, you could say they only fought to protect the status quo and let everything run as they once did, but that wasn't going to cut it for me. They either change or I kick them out. Ha ha ha, how funny is that? There were a lot of people out there who'd gladly fight for a change, so rather than letting them sit out on the benches and watch everything go down to shit, it's much better to put the eager laborers to work. Hey wait up. I turned around to see Pietro with a concerned look on his face. Where are you going? To do something, anything, for a change. I shrugged. What are you trying to change? How do you think this change of yours will look like? His voice was low, as if he was hanging on my answer or something. I only raised my hands at his question and replied, who knows? He blinked as if he didn't expect that kind of answer. What do you want me to say? I only know that some things would be better if changed. Ask me how those changes will be, but how the hell would I know? It's not as if being Vision came with a GoPro guidebook or a master plan or free crash course. I'm just winging everything as I go. Plans are only reliable if they are correctly predicted, so I can't always rely on them. I'm off if that's all. I turned around and left Pietro to himself and whatever it was that he was thinking. I don't know where the other Weapon X facilities are. Neither Stryker nor Cornelius knew, so I'm kind of flying blind if I just go at it like that. But before that, degree. In an undisclosed location, a shock-filled shout rang out in what looked like a laboratory as he received the ludicrous piece of information that he never expected. Ross is dead. How? He shouted at the phone he held to his ears. His face only contorted more in anger at the plainly inconclusive report he was given. Not just Ross, but even Stryker and Cornelius were dead, and the worst part was that they died at the bottommost floor of the base while being surrounded by a large number of armed soldiers. But that wasn't the most ludicrous thing he heard from the blasted call. Apparently all the soldiers in the base passed out at the same moment and only woke up to find their database thoroughly wiped and all their research destroyed with the prospect promising weapon H gone. He fought to control the tremble that coursed his body as anger and frustration clashed in his head. Ross' research was very important, and if all the materials were destroyed like they said, then how were they going to recuperate the losses? The materials there weren't simple things that money could buy. Degree. Vision POV. After checking up on Davis one last time, I left the compound to try my luck with one of the abandoned bases that Stryker was aware of, but it looks like my luck this time wasn't that good since the base looks to have collapsed a few years back from a landslide. Now I really regret killing Ross so easily. Having his memories in backup might have helped a bit. Well, I might have been a bit ahead of myself back there, but it's all a learning process. No biggies. Since there was nothing here for me to gain, I left the abandoned base and flew back to the compound. Degree. Days passed by and Davis' conditions continued to improve at a steady rate, which meant it wouldn't be too long before he wakes up. I really hope he decides to stay and be a part of my team. I didn't stay idle during this time, as I used my spare time when not busting up alien weapons trade to perfectly graft a set of Davis DNA and that of Banner and cultured them against vibranium. With this, I will be able to achieve the perfect fusion of my biological cells fully enhanced by vibranium. I wonder how the Hulk's DNA will affect me. It would be a very interesting case study to observe. Task completed. Base found after searching for the vibrating frequency clusters that adamantium vibrates at. Would you look at that? How long until my improvised serum becomes ready? Estimated time, 57 minutes. Quite a bit, but I don't think anything's going to happen there if I wait to inject myself with the serum before leaving. It was finally time for me to become a real biological android, and I'm quite expectant of the results. The reason I said real was because there will finally be a use of my biological side, and it would no longer count as a flaw in my synthetic composition. An hour went by very quickly, and the serum was finally done stabilizing. Unlike the normal green Hulk serum, this one was blue with small undertones of purple. Not ominous at all. My hands opened up and I inserted the vial inside, and before... Oh shit. Warning. The Mind Stone is violently reacting with the serum. All mental and processing functions are forced into overdrive. The Mind Stone is being influenced. Is this a bad time to say I should have been very careful with messing with the Hulk serum? That shit had always been known to be ghastly, but I blame my inquisitive mind. Well, might as well mix everything together. I pushed in everything I had into whatever godforsaken vat was brewing in my body and just let it cook. On the off chance that I die, well, I guess I'll just re-download my memories into one of the robots lying around in the base and start again. It really is hard to die as a sentient AI. Degree. Chapter 32. Changes. As Vision's mind blurred, a series of notifications defining the changes his body was undergoing rang out, but nobody was there to listen to it. The Mind Stone that has been reacting violently ever since the serum was injected turned purple for a few brief moments before turning back to its serene yellow. A major change had been enforced. The Infinity Stone that encompasses the universal mind has been corrupted and personified. All abilities related to the Mind Stone had experienced a large growth and evolution. The Mind Stone has gained a personality, Vision. The consciousness known as Vision has been stirred. Whoa. Degree. The Vision POV. I don't know why, but that felt like the greatest nap mixed with a full session mani-pedi anyone has ever gotten. Whoa. Okay, whatever that was has got to be straight up illegal. I don't know how to describe what I'm actually feeling, but it's the greatest thing I've ever felt in both lives. Not even sniffing on dope that one time came close to this. I looked at the time and saw that the upgrade only took a bit more of 10 minutes, so I was still on the clock. With a snap of a finger, I reflected the light bouncing off my body and projected it in front of me, forming a mirror to look at myself. Despite the body still being my default red, the feeling I was getting from it was anything but. If before I was a stupidly superpowered robot, then now I was a pro-max superpowered sentient robot. Though the differences were mostly unseen, the unbound sense of power I got just by looking at them was telling on its own. Without even giving it a command, my form shifted and my skin tone changed, and what stood in front of me was a very hunk guy of unearthly proportions. The face I was looking at was not one that should have belonged to a dude named Vision, but to a pimp named Mr. Steelio Girl. The Mind Stone was still visible in this appearance, which I'm not gonna lie looks a lot like Geralt of Rivia, more so if my hair was longer and white. Well, fantasizing about my appearance and whatever changes that came with it can come later. Right now I have a base to raid, some experiments to stop, and a recruiting to do. I walked out of the room only to bump into a confused-looking Wanda who reeled back in surprise only for her to freeze over as her eyes landed on me. Was it my face? Why is she looking at me like that? It's as if I'm some type of rare exotic fruit. A bit uncomfortable to be looked at with such intensity, but it's not as if I'm exactly clueless why she stepped into silence. I'd gawk at me too if I were into name. V-Vision, is that you? She finally managed to stutter out. Of course. I believe you of all people should be able to easily identify me regardless of what identity I take on. Yay, about that bit. It turns out that being psionically connected to Wanda was one of the perks that came with the Mind Stone. Whether that's a good thing or not remains to be seen. You feel different. You feel alive. Yes. More so than you've ever felt before. She spoke as if still in a trance as she brought her hand to hover in front of my face. Weird, but it's Wanda, so I guess normal? As much as I like being the focus of your full attention, I regrettably have somewhere I pressingly need to be at this moment. My words seemed to have done the trick as she finally snapped out of it, and it might have been the red glow in her hands, but I could swear she was mildly blushing. She faked a cough and regained her bearings, and with it was gone the cutely stunned Wanda to be replaced by a serious-looking Wanda. She would have looked more menacing if she hadn't stopped channeling her magic. Where are you going to? Can I come along with? She asked. Well, it's an extermination mission if you want to know. I turned to her and asked. You coming? With Wanda agreeing to come along, the both of us left the compound, but I had to literally drag her along because she couldn't keep up with the speed I was flying at, which had more than doubled what I could move at days prior. Looking at the privately owned underground experimental facility, a soft smile adorned my face that Wanda noticed. I'm just glad. It's a blessing in disguise that I get to experiment a little with willing test subjects. It was funny how her face changed from confusion to horror and then helplessness as she realized my little play on words. You know what they say, start every party with a bang. In a flash of light, a white hole was created in the middle of the base to the Earth's bedrock. I left Wanda to do whatever she wanted while I moved forward to a specific place in mind. Degree. While Vision and Wanda were about to decimate a research facility, in an opulent room was full of a group of people who made the country move as they pleased. Ross is dead. No one reacted to the news since they were all aware of it to an extent. I heard a mutant did it. This will grow to be a national concern. We can't even protect our own interests, and it's clear they don't consider themselves below the law. One of them, dressed in military attire, said as he fiddled through some files presented in front of him with a sneer on his face. Another nodded at the first words. He looked like a businessman with the full suit and tie he wore. We can't judge the entire mutant kind with the actions of one, but I think you are right. Whether it is planned towards this end or not, we can't allow this to become a precedent. Whether they liked it or not, they were simply unable to censor the rising awareness of the existence of mutants. It's a bit unfortunate, but now that Ross and Stryker are dead, maybe it's about time we revisit Norman Osborn's proposal. Rockcon and Trask are still looking for government partnerships to move ahead of some interesting projects, I hear. Another rebutted harshly. And how does that help our current situation? His words caused the man to laugh as if only he got a joke that everyone else missed. Oh, it's pretty simple. A sanction is all that's needed. We stop hiding them in the dark and bring them to light. He tapped on the table in front of him as he stared at a blurry picture of a man with a helmet on and metal works behind him. Since they want to live among everyone else so bad, then give them what they want, but with a few stipulations, of course. It'll also enable us to keep an eye on them and who knows, maybe recruit some of them before their abilities grow too big to be controlled. He concluded. The room fell into a cacophony of murmurs and gasps as the other occupants discussed with each other in hushed voices until one raised a question they all thought about. Have them registered. Name, birth date, address, everything of importance, and also the nature of their mutation. You can say it'll help them promote the livelihood of the people and also make them easily accepted. And anyone who refuses to sign automatically has the status of an illegal immigrant. Stipulations also need to be made to ensure that they don't use their abilities unless told to, as that can be accounted as juvenile acts or terrorism. The entire room felt cold all of a sudden as the bunch of willy old foxes' minds churned as they weighed the pros and cons of the suggestion. It was entirely doable, but there was just something that none of them wanted, even wishing it didn't happen. This can very well cause a rebellion or even a civil war, since most of them will see it as nothing more than slavery. It will cause some of them to resort to terrorism, and I think I speak for everyone here when I say none of us want that to happen. Mr. Sublime. The one who spoke was the person who sat at the head of the long table. I understand, Mr. President. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know what they say about eggs and omelets after all. Degree. Chapter 33. Time to be a Godfather 4. Wanda Maximoff POV. I'd admit that I didn't really care about his extermination mission when he had said it, because all I was looking for at that moment was an excuse to spend more time with him, which I'm never telling neither him nor Pietro, because the last thing I'd want was for Vision to think I'm clingy or be irritated by my presence. Well, my reason for Pietro couldn't be any more obvious. He's been spending a lot of his time with Davis and didn't bother to even come along from the last few missions we went on. 3. Now imagine my shock when suddenly Vision was all I could feel in all my senses. He was everywhere. 2. He didn't even answer when I tried reaching out to him. It felt as if the link that was always open between the both of us was suddenly cut, and that scared me a bit, so I made my way towards the medbay only to find out that he allowed no intrusion. Now imagine my surprise when the doors finally opened and the first thing I felt was an overwhelming sense of presence, and then Vision in a form I've never seen before. He felt more real, more alive, than anything he's ever felt before. 4. So yes, obviously I wanted to know more about what caused such a huge change in him, so I requested to follow him, and holy shit. He just drilled a hole from the ground surface to a depth of over 16,000 meters, and now it's currently flooding. All this from a negligible gesture from Vision. 2. Is he still a robot? That spontaneous thought crossed my mind, and no matter how I tried to picture him in a comparison against the likes of Iron Man and Ultron, he just completely eclipsed both of them that it wasn't even a comparison. I jumped into the hole with a red glow surrounding me, something that was a subconscious action at this point given how much Vision beat it into me in case of any surprise attack. The base was already in ruins due to Vision's attack, but I could see some people, armed combatants, and scientists running around. That alone was enough to clue me in on the nature of the experiments being done here. A fucking mutant. 1. How cute. They raised their guns to me and were even trying to get the perimeter advantage by circling around me. I didn't need a mirror to know how eerily red my eyes were as I used the newest ability Vision taught me recently on them. Shoot yourselves. 6. Despite their alarmed faces, none of them could do anything as they pointed the muzzle of their gun towards their allies. Oh no, it's a T-telepathy. Oh right. Vision did mention how telepathy was one of the most feared mutant abilities out there. How efficient. 4. I ignored the screams and gunshots and started ripping apart walls and steel doors while making sure to keep an eye on the workers in this facility. It's an extermination mission after all. My musings stopped abruptly when the entire base shook and an outrageous wave of kinetic energy swept through the entire base. Vision. Oh, sorry about that. Turns out I need some fine-tuning after my recent update. 1. As long as you're okay. Haha, I guess there's a joke in there that I'm not getting. Great, now he's becoming arrogant. At least he has something solid to base it on. Degree. Vision POV. I might have seriously underestimated how far these abilities of mine had grown. The beam thing should have been a clear indication, but I just blissfully ignored it, and almost crumbling this base had been the result. The entire place currently looked like the inside of a squeezed soda can, but thankfully I did not squeeze the little girl in my arms into a bloody paste. It wouldn't have killed her if I did, but you know, first impressions and all that. By my side was a middle-aged woman who was shaking in fear as she saw everything around her crumble. All around us were the mangled-up bodies of their captors. I had forgotten that Laura had a mother figure that cared for her in the facility she was made, and was about to kill her too if not for the way she was running to shield the girl from me and their captors. Her name was Sarah Kinney, and from what I remembered, it was her DNA that she used in creating Laura and thereafter took her as her own daughter. Both of you are safe now, I said softly and lowered the passed-out Laura to the ground so that her mother could check on her. 2. This was not part of my plans at all. I had completely forgotten that she had a mother of sorts during her time at the facility, and it was only after Sarah's death that Laura escaped and started hunting for Wolverine. How am I going to convince Sarah to let me recruit her daughter, because she no doubt had the worst experience when working for organized groups? Maybe I can use this. Don't move. A girl appeared behind me and leveled 2 adamantium blades to my neck. Let go of Vision. Before my captive had time to react, she was covered in a red glow and picked up only for her to slam the ground. Courtesy of Wanda. 14. The girl which I now identified as Kimura was truly an odd mutate, and if not for the obvious bad blood and death which Laura had for her, I would have been tempted to keep her. She was physically impervious to anything, even adamantium itself, which meant she couldn't feel pain and she could also phase. Kimura didn't have any time to react as a giant red fist descended on her. Wanda went full on demon time as she started using Kimura as a punching bag by using any attack she could think of on the girl until she started bleeding. Unfortunately for her, her insides weren't as impenetrable as her skin, and she also couldn't phase for one reason and one reason only. Chaos magic. 5. Wanda's efforts finally paid after getting beaten by me for so long that she started cursing the fact that I could phase, and since I always tell her not to limit herself to anything she was doing, she ended up coming up with a way to attack me even if I was molecular deconstructed. Chaos magic for the win. 2. I ignored Wanda and looked at the pair of woman and girl and saw that Laura was already waking up. I looked at both of them and said with no emotion in my voice, you have 2 options, join me or go your way. Whatever you choose, please bear in mind the future consequences. 1. Time to be a godfather. 7. Degree. Chapter 34, Making a Decision. Sarah shielded Laura away from my view while throwing a side eye to Wanda, who was toying around with Kimura. Sure, the girl could phase, but against someone who's been training to hit immaterial objects was just a bad matchup. So, what will your choice be? I turned to Sarah and asked. I might be saying that, but her choices weren't all that better. If she refuses, then she'll just be putting herself and her daughter up for grabs when the execs decides to come for her. Charles definitely wouldn't pick up Laura's signature because the Cerebro is the farthest thing from omniscient. Sarah's face had to start clouding it as she heard my words. What do you want from us? Whatever it is, please, she's just a child. My facial expression was the closest thing to a dead face anyone's ever seen, but I didn't make any effort to correct her thoughts until she came to a decision. Seeing me not answering her cries, she took a look at Laura and then looked at me with plea in her eyes. I just want to give her a normal life. I can do anything for you, but I just want her to be safe. She begged. My voice as bland as it could be with its robotic undertone that creeped people out. If that is her wish, then I'll see to it that it is done. Laura was looking at me with heavy distrust and skepticism, and if it weren't for her mother, she'd most likely have bared her claws at me and lose woefully. Unlike her daughter, Sarah thanked me with a resigned look, but this wasn't the time for straightening her misconceptions. Laura was the 29th clone they've made, and also the only one successful because Sarah had grafted in her DNA to that of Wolverine's without anybody knowing until much later. Meaning we can go to town with this base. While it's fun sniping mercenaries this past week, I wanted a fight. At least one I could exert a level of effort on. And I also want to test out a few kinks of this body. Round that up, Wanda. We have a couple of squads incoming. Wanda shouted back. I'm trying. She just won't stay down. Looks like she just noticed that despite looking disheveled, Kimura was fine for the most part. Data download completed. She's impervious to all outward physical damage. Try damaging her from the inside. With that said, I left the stunned mother and daughter duo and walked around the edge of the hole I dug and stood in front of the incoming group. No one said anything as they all rushed at me while I stood and waited for them. Some of them had guns and knives, stupid, while a few of them were mutates like Kimura. Let's tone it down, shall we? Order affirmed. Well, it's not an order but whatever. I ignored the bullets and caught the fist of the first guy that got to me, and from his widened eyes and the force behind his punch, a mutate, and crushed it, followed by a chop that went wrong. My hands went straight through the back of his neck and decapitated him. I threw his body away just in time to duck as an adamantium blade arm passed through where my head had been. Unlike Kimura, this guy only had some sections of his body covered in adamantium while the other parts were vulnerable. While it wasn't visible to the naked eyes, adamantium's vibrating frequency was something I was somewhat familiar with. I caught him by his outstretched hand and dragged him into the path of an incoming adamantium blade. Where the fuck did you guys get a shitload of adamantium from? Wasn't this supposed to be some super duper rare metal that only a few people know of? Oshi dash. Without even looking around, I knew I was surrounded, but that didn't bother me in the slightest as I just outstretched my hands and took control of everybody around me and used the adamantium knife from the dead guy and targeted all their weak spots. It took me less than a minute to decimate the entire squadron around me, so I turned to Wanda only to find her finishing off hers. Seriously, this girl was a walking nuke. How come she didn't play a major role other than a vengeful witch in the MCU is something I'll never understand. Impressive. She really did impressive work with Kimura, seeing as how she forcefully invaded the girl's mind and scrambled her brain to the point that even involuntary actions became hard to perform. Wait, where did you learn that? I never taught her that, trust me. She looked sheepishly at me as if embarrassed that I found out a white secret of hers. It's something that occurred to me when I was wondering how to take care of a speedster like Pietro. True, speedsters were very hard to mind control given how fast their brain works, and given her basic mastery of the mind arts, I can see why she went for the brute force method. What are we going to do with both of them? She pointed at Sarah and Laura, the former looking as if she couldn't decide whether to pass out from shock or fear, while the former with gratitude. Admiration? Her emotions were very wild, almost like an animal's. Looking at her now, Sarah is a pretty good geneticist and as someone programmed for prime efficiency, it's only right that I put good talent to good use. She'll work for me if she's up to the task. And as for little Laura here, I chuckled as the teenage girl bared her teeth at me in a growl because of my words. We'll let her choose what she wants. They both looked surprised for different reasons, but none of that matters now. What matters now is that I've gotten a geneticist and a potential recruit under me. We're leaving now. Degree. Chapter 35, Making a Choice. Where are we? Sarah asked as we touched down on the compound. The Avengers base. Upstate New York. The way her mouth opened up as my appearance changed to my normal red vision form was a bit hilarious. She ran up to me and grabbed my hands. Wait, did you just say Avengers? Like Tony Stark Avengers. Technically, it's not Tony Stark's, but when has anybody ever agreed with technicalities? Luckily for me this time, their data alone was not the only thing I came back with. Without my magnetic abilities, it would have been a hassle to carry that huge amount of adamantium along with me. Weapon H has regained consciousness. It's Davis. I turned to my entourage and apologized. I'm sorry, but something requires my immediate attention. Wanda here will see that you're both attended to, and I'll come back later to assess your situation. Immediate attention is required. Subject Davis is losing control. Vitals and mental signatures are rising sporadically. Change is imminent. Shit. Seriously? There couldn't be any worse timing than now for Davis to wake up and lose control. Ray-arg. Vision. Davis just woke up and lost control of his emotions, and now we have a rampaging little Hulk about to go loose. Show them to their rooms. I'll be back after putting the big baby to sleep. Pietro was already there and running laps around Davis, further angering the growing behemoth while Steve was making his way towards the both of them. I appeared in front of the berserk Davis from under him and delivered an uppercut that factory reset his head for a few seconds. What the hell is this thing? Pietro exclaimed while Davis roared in anger. Pietro meet Davis, also known as Weapon H meet Pietro, a speedster. The answer to my introduction was another ear-grating roar from Davis. Steve arrived at that moment and looked at Davis in surprise because anyone with enough brain cells could see his resemblance to the Hulk. Don't worry Steve, everything is alright, I said as I punched Davis so hard that he knelt down and couldn't stand up for over 10 seconds, and even when he did, it was on shaky feet. Davis's appearance was very similar to that of the Abomination, with large protruding bones from different parts and joints of his body due to him not having undergone the full experiment. The adamantium had yet to be grafted into his body by the time I rescued him, so he was pretty much incomplete as compared to the real Weapon H. Not in the mood to have a slugfest with a Hulk, I placed my hand on his head and muttered, "Sleep." His body receded back to his human form as he lost consciousness, while the two spectators just stood off to the side in silence. Pietro, take him back to the medbay and keep an eye on him. I'll be back after a few minutes, I said to the speedster, who grumbled but did what he was told. Since I am already monitoring all his bodily functions, it's better I deal with our two new tenants first before focusing all my time on Davis. Degree. Sarah Kinney POV. She didn't know what to expect when she started working at the facility. At first she thought it was a groundbreaking project where she was researching the benefits of certain material ores to human biology, only for it to turn into a secret experiment where they were trying to create the clone of a certain mutant she only knew as the Wolverine. Laura had been a stroke of inspiration on her part, and since her conception, she took the girl as her own child, yet was never able to do anything about the tortures and experiments they forced the young girl through. What a mother she was. Her accepting that man's proposal, the one the girl called Vision, was all for the sake of her atoning for all what she's done wrong in regards to Laura. He was a mutant, or at least she believed him to be with how strong he was, along with the woman by his side. Just the two of them completely eradicated the place that had been synonymous with hell to her for years and counting. Now imagine her surprise when after she's accepted her fate yet again to be used as a pawn in a powerful person's game, she suddenly arrived at the base of the Avengers. Something she'd once dreamt of happening had suddenly become real in her eyes. You shouldn't worry too much. No one's going to hurt you here. Not with us and Vision around. The lady, Wanda, said to her as she led the both of them inside a room that she concluded was expensively furnished at first glance. She turned around to Wanda while putting Laura behind her. Can you tell me why we are here? If it's for interrogation, then I can promise you that I don't know much other than the research I worked on. Wanda looked at her in surprise as if she couldn't understand what Sarah was saying. Who said anything about interrogation? Then why are we here? Wanda shrugged as if she was asking something obvious. Didn't Vision tell you? Maybe he needs your assistance as a geneticist. Nothing else. They both conveniently ignored the booms and loud roars that occasionally filled the whole compound. A few minutes later, Vision arrived wearing a white-sleeved shirt and black pants, almost looking professional if not for his robotic exterior and the gem between his brows. Sorry for the wait. I had to put someone back to sleep, he said lightly and drew out a chair from behind a table for him to sit on. Yeah, where were we? Sarah took in a deep breath, hoping what Wanda said was true and secretly hoping that the Avengers weren't going to throw her to the black box for her crimes. I am willing to cooperate with you as long as she's safe and provided for. She's just an innocent girl and not the weapon you might think she is. The first words that left her mouth was the defense of her daughter, but all it did was prompt a smile out of Vision's lips. Trust me, I'm not a fan of forcing children to fight and kill for my sake. Truthfully, to me your worth completely overshadows that of your daughter. Trait of humans that makes them assume the worst if they are caught in a bad spot. Unlike what you are probably thinking, I need your help with me and a few people in particular, all at your own discretion. As for your daughter, the choice for what she wants is up to you both. He explained with a smile still on his face, but his voice dead. If only she knew his exact thoughts, well, she would have still accepted because she really had no choice. Manipulation at its finest. The sentient synthezoid thought. Degree. Chapter 36, Undercurrents. Vision POV. Faced with what I had to say, Sarah had no choice than to accept my proposal. Really, what other choice did she have? There is no way she can go back to her former life before the facility, as they'd just find her, kill her and take their X-23 back. I was her safest bet, and the fact that we were an autonomous group, and the Avengers no less, sold it better to her. The reason I needed her was simple. While calculations and high processing speed were good, it just couldn't beat the innovative human mind. Vision was made by humans after all. I was not the smartest in the room when geniuses were involved. And also, while I could build bodies to take up any task I wanted done, it'll make me be exactly like Ultron, since I'll start thinking I no longer need people. As for Laura, despite her stoic cold face, her feelings were more vibrant, so I knew beforehand what choice she would make when it came to the options of living a normal life or putting her abilities to good use. So what are we now? Sarah asked after she confirmed that she and her daughter were out of harm's way. Right now we are walking through the hallways after Laura fell asleep, leaving me and Sarah alone in our conversation. Technically, you're free to do what you want. She scoffed lightly at that. Right, technicalities. She then looked at me and prodded. What do you want from me other than my knowledge and assistance as a geneticist? Despite the ambiguous nature of your words, nothing much. A subordinate, an underling, an assistant, anyhow you will describe yourself in those settings is what I need from you. That doesn't sound like the words of a hero at all. Now it was my turn to scoff. Heroes are humans too. But you're not. I stopped and looked at her and she did the same, but I could feel the tiny tempo of her erratically beating heart. She was nervous, yet appeared confident. Really, what gave that away? Was it my looks, the voice, or my obvious inhuman abilities? I almost couldn't help but break my cold face at the look of utter confusion on her face as she couldn't decide between whether I was being sarcastic or curious. I look forward to working with you, Sarah Kinney. Without waiting for her response, I left for Davis, who was still unconscious. Degree. General POV. While Vision was attending Davis conditions, the world was in panic as the news of General Ross' death was leaked to the public, and along with it came the report around the speculations of his death and the nature of those involved. What was regarded as an urban legend suddenly became the topic of international papers' headlines. The rise of the new human. The New York Times and the Daily Bugle had engaged in a very heated debate about the perceived nature of the new human species, the veracity of the information released, and the effect it will have on the world, and how modern warfare will change to accommodate them. While the papers went to war with their words and vocal verbose, secret organizations were already making plans to adapt to the new changes and the public society. In one of such organizations, a meeting was going on to determine the benefits and favors they could get from this open reveal. A group of 10 people, men and women, sat in a chamber, each decked with the most expensive amount of jewelry and clothing money could buy. Gold, diamond, fine silk, and every other material of opulence could be found in this room in abundance and more. Every one of them in attendance carried an air of nobility, but they were anything but. At the head of the table sat a man and women, both stark opposites of the other. The man was clad in all black and gold embroideries, while the woman was in an all-white revealing dress, if it could still be called that, with how scandalous and sinful it hugged every pore of her body. The Hellfire Club. It does not need to be said twice the reason we are all gathered here at this moment. The man in black, Sebastian Shaw, the Black King of the Hellfire Club, and also the highest-ranking member. We've long known about the mutant species, Shaw. The main problem is that the current spotlight being given to them at this moment is not good for any of us. A tall blonde-haired man spoke with a soft voice that would have been feminine if not for the aged undertone it carried. Edward Buckman, the White King of the Hellfire Club, spoke. He then turned to his young woman sitting on his left. What do you think, Emma? Sitting on the right-hand side of Sebastian Shaw was Emma Frost, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. I believe it doesn't matter that much. It's not as if just us alone could shield such a secret, and it was only time before it came out. Our concerns should be who leaked it and for what purpose did they do it. Emma Frost gave her own opinion. Unlike what most might think, and many more oblivious of, the Hellfire Club was a secret organization for the elites and those who had a major hand in moving the world's economy. A few of the club's highest-ranking members were mutants, unknown to their human brethren, and it was with this influence that they stirred the current mutant community, but the surprise reveal was something that none of them predicted. Shaw looked at Emma for a brief second before agreeing with her words, along with Edward Buckman. Shaw then directed at Buckman, I reckon Ross' death dealt a major setback to your secret project. I heard another one of your bases were destroyed. Buckman snarled as he remembered the news he got a few hours ago, and even now he was still having a hard time believing that his Project Armageddon was being delayed due to these setbacks. It's the work of a blasted mutant. All it'll take is time, and I'll have them right where I want them. If he had paid attention at the moment he said those words, he would have caught the faces of a few members darkening in sneer. Degree. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. Undercurrents 2. A/N. Blasted exams. No other words needed. Degree. In a huge mansion in Salem that functioned as a boarding school to the public, Professor Charles Xavier, a publicly respected figure as an anthropologist and psychiatrist with multiple PhDs to his name, sat in his office with a few teachers and a furry ape-man. You sounded urgent in your call, Charles. What's wrong? Hank McCoy asked as he sat down with other people in the room. The white-haired blue-eyed Aurora Monroe, Storm. The short, gruff, and hairy James Howlett, Wolverine. The stoic burly Piotr Peter Rasputin, Colossus. And the youngest of everyone gathered here, the visor-wearing Scott Summers, Cyclops. Charles's wheelchair moved with a tap of a button on the armrest, from the back of his desk to the front of his teachers. A topic was just put into discussion following the death of General Ross, which was just an excuse in my opinion, and it concerns us mutants. Even without him saying anything, the others in the room could already tell that it was nothing good. It's the government they are talking about. Charles gave a wry smile as he saw them already preparing for an unsavory news. It has yet to be passed into a bill, but they are calling for a mutant act, right, duty, and obligation. Basically it's putting the mutant on the face of the public. That's nice and all, but we all know it's not as pretty as you make it sound. Give it to us, Chuck. Logan said with thick arms crossed against each other. Charles nodded, and this time, gone was the demure expression on his face as he delivered the caveat that some might react badly to. They want all mutants to register, or I guess re-register, as citizens, and the state will be given the right to track all mutants in the country and assess their potential danger levels. This is however the gist of it. The mood of the office straight up plummeted as if falling into a tundra. None of the people here were stupid. Being one of the proactive front of the mutant kind, they knew firsthand what sort of games the government was more likely to play when given access to super-powered individuals. This doesn't sound good. Yes, but a lot of people will sign the registry. Fights will ensue, and I can imagine them saying those who refuse to sign will be treated as criminals. No matter how atrocious the notion of it is, I have to admit it was nicely done. Aurora opinionated. Colossus looked at her, confusion evident on his face. How? She then explained, due to the nature of the act and it's specifically targeting mutants, the people who will be fighting are mutants. Those who want to sign and those who don't. Those in power don't have to do anything as the mutant kind devolves into internal strife. Civil war. Charles interjected. Logan grunted as he thought about it, and his mind wandered towards some of the children in the school. Some of them would sign, no doubt. He said it in a whisper, but it was no doubt heard by everyone. Wait, why would they want to sign? Scott exclaimed. Everyone kept quiet at his question as they were uncomfortable with the answers. They all knew why. They wanted to return to the public, to their families, and live the life they dreamed of. Becoming a mutant forced them to hide themselves until the public was ready to accept them, and now that the very notion of it was about to be dangled in their faces and with them given the full right to choose and become an open citizen of the country once again, it left no room for doubt that some, most, were going to sign it. Seeing as they were going nowhere with this line of questioning, Hank changed the topic. What of the mutants they said killed Ross? Have they found out who it was? Charles tapped a few buttons in his chair and connected it with the TV in the room and drew their attention to it. I was able to procure the files from a friend of mine in the Congress, and this is the report from a few soldiers in the base. They looked at it for a few minutes and noticed a few things in it. So no one knew how he got there. And there were no recordings of him either until he appeared there out of thin air. And bullets also bounces off his skin. Also energy projection. Logan pointed out. Teleportation, superhuman physicality, and energy projection? That's quite some good abilities for one person. Hank commented as he gave the reports a once-over. Are we sure he isn't one of Magneto's? Scott asked, but Charles shook his head but didn't outright deny the possibility of it. I'll see what I can do in terms of finding this mutant. Carry on as normal until we get more news of this. Saying so, Charles wheeled out of the room with a task to perform in mind. Degree. Vision POV. I looked at Davis as he groggily opened his eyes and blinked for a few seconds before closing his eyes back as his hand made to grab the blanket and draw himself deeper into it to get a more comfy sleep. Bang! Crash! He jumped out of bed with urgency as his eyes scanned every inch of the room before landing on me.
I guess the only appropriate greeting here is good morning. My voice was calm as I took a step in front of him and managed to wiggle off, taking a long action with extreme scrutiny.
Who are you? Where am I? he asked even as his eyes took in all the escape routes present in this room. Like the huge sliding glass door that covered a large section of the room, I paid no attention to his scrutiny as a part of my mind sifted through the cluster of data available to me after accessing my body, while another sort focused on Davis. My name is Vision, and I brought you here. And where is here exactly? Upstate New York. Huh. I sighed at how he was on the uptake and decided to elaborate it further. I rescued you from the base you were kept in and brought you here to try and save you, whatever of you remained that is. He looked at me unsurely and then walked towards the glass panel and stared at the whole compound that was visible from up here with slacked jaws. Where exactly did you say this is? Allow me to reiterate, the Avengers compound, upstate New York. Chapter 38, Chapter 38, Joining the Fold. After convincing him that he was out of the scope of Ross' experiments, Davis calmed down and listened to what I had to say. First things first, here, take this. I've downloaded all the information from your experiments into it. I figured you should know exactly what was being done to you. I gave him a phone that I personally encrypted so if anyone ever tampered with it or hacked into it, I'll know right away. Though he still didn't fully trust me, he accepted the phone nonetheless. It's bugged right? Oh definitely. He looked a bit surprised at how easily I confirmed it but didn't say anything else and kept it. 3. So what now? You're pretty calm from what I'd expect from a Hulk. A Hulk? Like the big green guy and the other that wrecked Harlem. I nodded. Well, I keep getting the feeling that I have to stay calm no matter what. And also you were the one who knocked me out, right? He remembered that? So less like Banner and more like She-Hulk. Good to know. 3. That aside, he scoffed at my deflection but I ignored it and continued. I'll get straight to the point then. I want you to work under me. This time the shock of Davis' face was very apparent for all to see. He definitely never expected that. The goal is nothing concrete at this point in time, but basically it's me wanting you and a few others to form a group. I said. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat and asked. And the present purpose of this group? I clarified. It's to stop cases like yours and maybe have you guys do a few little heroics. Anything young guns like you want. 4. And what about you? You're pretty strong, right? Are you not going to do anything? He asked. Probably not dumb, at least streetwise. You can consider me a benefactor of sorts. The mythical aegis for all what you will be doing. I'll be your shield for any actions you take. Obviously under my discretion, of course. 4. He might be young, and not the weapon age he used to be in the comics but he was still a Hulk regardless. His potential was already in the big leagues if harnessed well. And from the flow of the conversation so far, he doesn't seem all that averse to it. 4. So henchman. He looked disgusted as the words rolled off his tongue which made me laugh a little as I shook my head. I'm thinking more along the lines of a subordinate. Accommodation and living expenses are free, also you get paid. Heroes don't survive on good deeds after all, or mercenaries if you are the crazy type. He fell silent as he mulled over the proposal and I knew I already had him. If he wasn't interested in having better powers than the subpar mutation he had before the experiments, he wouldn't have listened to what I had to say in the first place. Young people like him were very hooked on the idea of having superpowers and doing the impossible, either good or bad. Davis apparently was the same. He finally looked at me with cold resolved eyes and made a request. The people who tortured me, will I get to kill them? Well, it's not as if I was expecting him to just forget what happened just because he was saved and he looks like he is quite the vengeful one. You can't. His anger skyrocketed at that moment and it was just about to tip over until I completed my statement and it dispersed like sand in the wind. Because I already killed them for you. He looked at me for a few seconds until I gestured for him to check the phone which he did for a few minutes, reading through the news articles and also my own narrative of what happened in the base, and broke into a laugh. I guess being an Avenger isn't so bad. So am I like what? A second-hand Hulk. His attitude mellowed out and he turned out to be just another young adult that had a lot of unnecessary topics to talk about. 2. I have already sent news of Davis to Banner and even without monitoring the tracer I left on him, I know that with his guilt he couldn't bear to leave someone as young as Davis, who suffered due to his research, alone. He was currently on his way back to the compound after his little sabbatical and since he was one of the smartest men I know, he could help me understand me more. So what should I call you, boss, sir or leader? Just Vision is fine. He looked at me and shrugged. So I've been meaning to ask, but you're a mutant, right? What kind of powers do you have? Right. The red default skin made was a dead giveaway to any ignorant person making them think I'm a mutant because no one thinks about a living robot walking in their midst nowadays. I'm not a mutant. I left him with his confusion and went to the training area where Pietro was already waiting for me. I have missed training for a few days and I wanted to make sure he wasn't slacking off. 1. When I got to the huge auditorium that functioned as my makeshift gym, one I specifically made for people in the superhuman tier, I saw Pietro around laps around the entire place while punching the numerous shock-absorbing mannequins I placed at different points around the place. This specific training helped both to measure his punching power and acceleration lag between each small angular distance. He was increasing his speed on a daily level which made his improvements greater than Wanda's. His speed was already over Mach 10 so I knew it won't be long before he hits his first speed block. It was also why I wanted him to be as prepared as possible and have an extra bag of tricks in his arsenal. He couldn't throw lightning bolts since he didn't produce the kinetic energy burst of lightning the Flash did so I had a few things in mind. 2. I can see you just crossed Mach 10, how about we kick things up a notch and make it less repetitive? I called his attention as my invisible camouflage faded off. Hey Vis, what do you have in mind? His voice was steady, showing exactly how easy he found his present routine, inadvertently making me right once again. How would you like to learn how to phase like me? Truthfully I'm just winging this out of my metallic ass but it's worth a try. 21. Degree. Chapter 39. Chapter 39. Shy Girl. 6. Crash. End. And that was Pietro crashing into a wall for the 30th time since we started this training. Oh, I think I broke a tooth. Came Pietro's pained groan. I had expected something like this, but there was nothing I can do about it. A speedster's ability was something that most times than not defied all physical laws. It wasn't something simple calculations could get correct all the time. 1. Phasing, for example, is vibrating your molecules to a different dimensional frequency that allows you pass freely through any obstacles in their origin material world. The higher the vibrational frequency, the harder it is to phase through the object. 2. The prime example for this would be adamantium. Someone like Kitty Pryde will find it hard, or maybe even outright impossible, to vibrate through the metal. 2. Rest for now. It's obvious we are not making any headway with this. If the theory and believed notions are considered true, then it's entirely possible that speed isn't the problem. I already considered that option, meaning that I'll have to leave Pietro to figure it out on his own. Maybe this will help him further down the line in reaching higher speeds. 1. Well, thanks for pointing that out. He grunted sarcastically. Had enough of watching. I suddenly said out loud, which confused Pietro. That was until Laura stepped out of her hiding spot where she had hid herself silently for the last 10 minutes watching Pietro run into brick walls while I watched the amusing scene. 4. That's the new girl. He whispered to me as we both stared at Laura, who just remained standing in her initial position, resulting in an awkward staring competition. I walked towards her and bent down to her level. You want to have a go? I gestured at the training ground, but she kept staring at me. To that she nodded. Well, it's not like I have that much to do anyway. Sure, let's go. I don't know why she wanted to fight me, but it means nothing to me if I just humor her for a minute or two. We stood across each other in an open space with Pietro and Sam watching from the sidelines. Ready when you are. She responded with 2 pairs of 2 adamantium claws that extended from her knuckles, her eyes strained on me without so much as a single twitch. Fair. Sam whistled as he saw her display while Pietro just stared with interest since he was curious about her abilities. She rushes at and slashed down with her left claws, which I easily dodged by taking a slow step back, resulting in her twisting to cover the distance and continue the stroke with her right claws. But this time, instead of taking a step back, I just caught her tiny arms, stopping her attack dead in its track. She growled and aimed her free hand to skewer mine, holding her right hand, which prompted me to free it only for my proximity sensors to blare in alarm, enabling me to narrowly dodge the leg swipe she sent my way. On each of her legs were a single claw each. She looked between frustrated and angry as she saw how I kept dodging, weaving, and parrying her attacks, which in turn made them ferocious as she slowly aimed to kill. Fight back. Huh? 5. This was the first time I heard her speak, which took me by surprise because unlike my more imaginative thoughts, her voice was tiny, just like that of a young child. Do you really want me to fight back? I asked her and she unsurprisingly nodded. That's not going to end well for her. Sam idly commented with pity in his voice, with Pietro wincing in agreement. She most likely heard what they said as her expression grew fiercer, only for it to move into full-blown confusion when she found out that she couldn't move at all. Metallic properties in subject Laura only extends to her claws, hence only partial control is acquired. That was me using only the magnetic manipulation aspect on her just to send a message. The most likely reason why she wanted to fight me was because her animalistic sense, something she got from Logan before it was dampened because of his adamantium fusion, probably picked up that I was the strongest person around, conversely the highest threat in her territory. Well, I wouldn't know the exact reason because I don't speak animal. Is that enough? I calmly strode to her front and asked with a small smile marring my face. She struggled for a bit but dropped her head in defeat when she realized trying to was useless as none of her limbs budged an inch. Right. I released her from my hold and stroked her head, much to her indignation. Killer or not, she still feels like a little girl. Natasha's voice came through the commas at that moment. Vision, Cap, and Tony want you at the loft. It's a meeting with the president and a few others. 2. Well, little one, I'll see you when I get back. Okay. Even after trying numerous times to hit my hands away with an irritated growl, I didn't feel anything from her other than embarrassment. 4. Leaving the trip alone, I contemplated whether to go as Og Vision or New and Improved Vision. 9. New and Improved it is. I met the both of them talking to each other on a balcony, so they also noticed me as I approached. Tony, being a classic, started with a light banter. New look? I'll give you 9 points out of 10. I replied just as quick and smooth. At least I changed. You never do. I then turned to Steve, who was trying to blend with the atmosphere. What's the schedule? He frowned slightly at that as he answered. Sokovia. But it's likely just a ruse to get us to attend. Why can't we just ignore it again? This time Stark stepped in. Whoa, hold up there, big guy. It's called accountability. We not showing would be the same as giving them ammo to arm the press against us. Even if it's not about Sokovia, the least we can do is hear them out. I don't like any of this, but I guess public appearance and credibility is just as important in the long run. 2. Degree. Chapter 40. Chapter 40. The discussion. I/N. I'm rounding up my exams this week, so hopefully I can finally focus on trying to improve the story plot-wise. I really need this holiday face with open mouth dashing away. 1. General POV. Unlike what Vision, Steve, and Tony expected, the hearing they were called to didn't just include them and the state parliament, but also a very known group, the Fantastic Four. 5. Vision had been a little surprised when he saw them, but due to the overabundance of information he had on them, the surprise did not last longer than the initial second it appeared. Before they could even get settled, someone's sarcastic voice rang out that drew the attention of the entire room to their right of the trio. Oh, it's so good that the Avengers finally decided to arrive on time and join us, as soon as we just started. Well, Senator Kelly, it's called arriving fashionably late. In case you haven't heard, it's the go-to time for billionaires and heroes. Try to keep up with the trend, will you? Tony said as he waved at the ashen-faced senator who was the first to come into his crosshairs faster than any terrorist has ever done. 8. Another thing they noticed was the absence of the president, but they already expected something like that, so unwanted surprises there. The only people who exhibited surprised expressions on their faces were the group of three heroes who sat together at one corner. The Vision energy reading I'm getting from him is off the charts. Who is he? Reed Richards silently whispered as one of his pet projects in his pockets started beeping haphazardly. 2. Susan Storm looked at the man with Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. Is there something wrong with him? If she had to give her initial opinion of the man was that he had quite a presence. 2. Different from Tony Stark, who was already a public famous figure for various reasons since he was a child, and Steve Rogers, who was an American war hero everybody in this room grew up hearing about, the man had a presence to him that was just alien. Reed tapped the little device in his pockets and stopped the beeping after making sure that the cause for the alarm was just because of his presence. Vision looked at them, having felt something reacting to him, but after seeing what it was, did nothing else and just took his seat silently between Tony and Steve Stark. After everyone was all seated down, the panel started the hearing by inquiring the identity of the only stranger in the room. Oh him, this is Dash. The name is Vision. Just Vision. The reply from Vision sent the entire room into murmur as some inquired of who Vision was, while those in the know wondered why Stark brought something like him here. Vision, I reckon what brought you here. It is my belief that the discussion heard today concerns the Avengers and all involved group gathered here. Am I wrong? Yes, but Dash. But what? Stark invited me as a member of the Avengers. But you are not a founding member, are you? Are you? A founding member of this board? Of the states? Or maybe a founding member of human laws? 8. The room went deathly still as Vision countered every single retort from any panel member that they became cautious of trying to put him in a spot. 8. That didn't make them shy away from bringing in the nature of his existence, which Vision stated that he also was made of independent human cells which were closely bonded with the mechanics that made up his body. In other words, he could be called a human with cybernetic implants. They would have continued along that line of argument had the two fed-up heroes by his side not decided to put a stop to it. Although the panel weren't happy with it, they consoled themselves that this wasn't the main reason they gathered here for today. I strongly object. Vision was the first to object as soon as he heard what was being said, and not just him but Steve also. The three present members of the Fantastic Four remained quiet even as the entire room devolved into a rowdy argument. Even though he had said expected something like this, he was never in favor of the Accords that now not only had the Avengers name scripted on it, but also mutants as a whole. Whether you agree to it or not, doesn't matter. What matters is keeping the peace of the country and freedom to those who want to be a part of that peace. Neither Vision, Stark, Steve, or even the Fantastic Four had any pulling power to change any decision given by the panel after all adjourned meetings were concluded. The reason why they were here in the first place along with the Fantastic Four was because they had superpowered humans, mutates, who also fell into the category of mutants, at least as far as the public was concerned. You are expected to sign the Accords when they are presented to the public to set the standard. Steve cut off the speaker at that point. Why are you speculating your statements as if you think we will sign it? You won't. The speaker asked in a cold tone. Steve's eyes didn't waver for a moment as he replied, under those conditions, no. Those terms are no different than forcing them to publicity, and also the fact that they are compensation for coming out is no different than slavery, or depends on how you want to interpret it, entitled prostitution. Vision added. 5. Someone finally had enough and retorted loudly for anyone to hear. Wait, I don't remember us ever granting human rights to a computer processor. 4. He didn't. 1. He just did, Junior. Before anyone could say anything else, all the monitors and display screens in the room changed, first displaying the Avengers logo and then abruptly changed as some displayed reports, some voice recordings, some even videos of the minister who just spoke. 2. Crimes include rape, drug and weapons trafficking, human trafficking, pedophilia, assault, patricide, bribery, embezzlement, and every other petty and large crimes you can imagine a politician committing. Vision said coolly and reclined into his chair and turned to Tony. How did I do? 9. Tony made an okay gesture with his hands. Couldn't have handled it better. 1. Vision nodded and then faced the room full of stunned and apprehensive ministers and lawmakers and the ghostly white minister who just stood frozen. Can we start this meeting now? 21. Degree. Chapter 41. Chapter 41. The discussion 2. The meeting continued in a more subdued atmosphere after Vision ousted a corrupted member of the ministers and he was dragged away by law enforcement agents. Though he had more outright damning material that could put more than half of the people here in jail for a lifetime, doing that would only backfire against him and the Avengers as a whole. Not to mention that it was just not possible for him to thoroughly uproot every corrupt personnel in government, all the way down to the armed forces. Corruption was a part of every ruling system. Well, he could stop this, but that was if he wanted to embark in the road of a tyrant, but that was a thought he abhorred. The more the talks went on, the more he became convinced that none of the people here mattered. At least not in the grand scheme of things. The only reason he entertained whatever this farce was instead of just slamming a fuck you in their faces was because he wanted to prevent anything related to a civil war between any superpowered coalition. He stole some glances at the Fantastic Four and saw how uncomfortable they were with the stipulations presented, but unlike how he and Steve adamantly rejected it, they looked like they were actually considering it if a few concessions were to be made. Even Tony looked unsure as more time went on. He said less and less, and most of the time he could be found deep in thought that he had to be tapped by Vision when his attention was called. Vision was the one who was mostly speaking for the Avengers with support from Tony every now and then and little input from Steve. The problem is how your view toward mutants is constructed. Vision spoke after listening to what they had to say over and over again. And what do you mean by that? Candidly, most of your opinions are based on ignorance. The fact that you are forcing them into coming out will do more harm than good, and if not for the greed and lust for power that drives you, this would have been the turning point of humanity as a whole. Instead you are condemning it. A few teeth ground against each other while damning scowls and snarls echoed throughout the hall until someone spoke up after feeling off-put by the android. Are you saying we are fools who don't know how to make the best decision for the betterment of our country and people? The way he asked the question was a dead giveaway that he wanted Vision to stumble before he was bombarded with questions, but he had no idea about how Vision dealt with such scenarios. Bluntness. If you are not fools, then what are you? Clearly you cannot see the benefits presented with the emergence, so no doubt I would have no other option to call you foolish as the definition fits. Whoa, slow your roll, player. Don't you think that's a bit far? Tony hurriedly dragged Vision down to his seat in panic after the blatant dressing down he just gave the room full of lawmakers. Vision shook his head at Tony and faced the yellow-faced audience and gave them another dose of facts before any of them could retort.
A man known as
Magneto almost toppled the country's military with his power over electromagnetism. Tell me, what can you do against that? Or maybe someone who can run faster than the fastest bullets, or someone impervious to physical damage and pain, he said, and then stated with utmost confidence something none of them wanted to hear. This country cannot support a war against mutants. That was all it took for the room to devolve into chaos as everybody started raising their voices just so they could be heard. Apart from Vision, no one else knew that there was a few groups of people listening in on what was being said in the room. The eavesdroppers weren't using the standard methods, so it was a little hard for Vision to trace them back, but the one he was most sure who it belonged to came from the telepathic wave that covered the entire room during the duration of the meeting. Excuse me. Someone called out to Vision as they were just about leaving, and turning back, they saw a group of 3 familiar faces making their way towards them. Reed, Susan, Johnny. Good to see you guys again. Steve greeted the incomplete hero group and they all greeted back enthusiastically. Do you guys need anything? He asked. Reed then spoke a little embarrassed. Actually, I wanted to speak with Vision about a few things. About what? This time it was Tony who asked. He wanted to have a talk with Vision here. You know how he is with things that catch his interest. Johnny explained. They all looked at Vision, but unexpectedly he shook his head before making a concession. I am quite pressed for time at the moment, and I also wasted quite a bit of it playing along with that farce, so maybe another time. Vision said, and then continued his walk. He's kind of a hard guy to talk to, Johnny said as they left the place. Why did you want to talk to him, Reed? Sue asked curiously. Why wouldn't I want to talk to him?
understand their ignorance of his reasons. He is a fully sentient, self-developing AI.
Did you see how he scolded the entire room? I just wanted to have a few discussions with him. Maybe even figure out his thought processes. And you are forgetting about the crazy Shinik energy readings you got from him, right? Johnny asked, but depending on his expression, his words were anything but. Reed was taken aback and scratched his head in embarrassment. Yeah, that too. Why did you even bring that thing here? Sue wondered. Oh, that? It was to block any Shinik interference in the room, he simply said as they started walking to their car, ignoring the looks they were getting from the paparazzi and lawmakers. Shinik interference? You mean mind control? You thought they might be a telepath in the room? Sue asked in shock. Not necessarily. There might have been some around the perimeter, but I know there was some telepathic presence in the room, but they just listened in. No mind possession, though I'm not completely sure. He frowned at his own words and brought out a round disc from his pockets, inspecting it with scrutiny before he sighed and kept it. Johnny didn't miss the skeptic gleam in his eyes as he looked over the device, so he asked. Vision. For some reason, I doubt something like this would have stopped him if he was psychic. The siblings looked at each other before shrugging, which allowed Sue to ask something that had been on her mind since the nature of the meeting was revealed. What do you think about the Accords? Her voice was as casual as it could be, showing no importance to the question asked. Reed looked at Sue and simply answered his honest thoughts. While there might be truth in Vision's words, the risks it presents far outweighs whatever benefits he probably calculated. The present situation is akin to a virus, better to have it under control at its initial stage than let it fester unsupervised. His words caused the siblings to frown slightly and Johnny expressed his disconcert. I feel you, man, but we all know how it's going to backfire. While it might not be as grim as the Vision dude made it sound, it wouldn't be pretty either. Reed merely chuckled at those words and waved it off. No such thing, I assure you. Whatever you say, man. Degree. Chapter 42. Chapter 42. Banner is back. Vision POV. Well, that went well. I chuckled as I remembered the faces they made when they finally realized that they were threatened by a robot. Nothing was wrong with registering mutants into the government registry, since something really had to be done about the various mutations that appeared every day and their unending limits. The problem, however, was how they went about doing it. Unlike what they might think, they had very few defenses against a mutant uprising, with the foremost being the Sentinels. The reason why they even pushed the mutants as far as they did was because most of them were adolescents and also their morals. Well, we know who to blame and also thank for that. Looking back at it now, everything around me has been heavily influenced by my presence in a way that the events of those changes were like a stone rolling down a steep hill. I was having an irritating buzz every time I thought or made a prediction about how things could go. Right now I was just receiving everything how they came and only controlled the ones I was sure can be easily changed or influenced by my presence. Speaking of changes, how can I even begin to explain this? I have been blissfully ignoring it after going through and failing to understand how pumping myself up with the green juice caused all this. The easiest thing to understand was that I now had a perfectly fused biomechanical body. I could switch between flesh and spare parts at will, and it was a perfectly seamless transition. The downside was that my biomass only made up at most 35% of my body, so my mechanical parts automatically structured themselves in the order of a model human body. Since I was in full control of how I wanted the biomass to form around my body, I could add and remove parts that would have been biological defects had I been remotely human. Hell, I could form wings on my back if I wanted, or an extra pair of arms. It was mostly cosmetic, that was if I wanted it to be, and could be the real deal at the same time. So yeah, you could say I finally achieved what I wanted. Stark left to go attend to business, as usual, while I drove the awfully quiet Steve back to base. Still thinking about the Accords? Trust me, it's not worth the time you put all those efforts into, I said lightly as I let the car move slowly at uniform speed. Steve let out a wry smile, seeing how he was easily seen through, and just rested his head on the window, watching the speeding buildings and cars outside. You've said it, right? This could either make or break the team, and I'm hoping it doesn't, that's if it hasn't already. I released a sigh as I saw Steve behaving despondent like a neglected housewife. Despite being a robot, it irked me in a way I wasn't comfortable with, seeing a fully grown man like Steve look and feel what I would describe as depression and longing. Banner is back at the compound. I ended up blurting out and heaved a sigh of relief under my breath when that caught his attention and made him relax with the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. Thank you, Vision, he ended up saying, which surprised me, so I turned to look at him and just commanded the car to drive itself. You're the reason why Bruce came back. You also made sure Tony checks in every once in a while. You're outlandish and strong, sure, but you care about the existence of the team. That's more than I can ask of anyone, he clarified. I looked at him for a few seconds before taking back manual control of the wheels. It's no problem. Whether you guys like it or not, I'm here to stay, and the Avengers is as much as mine as it belongs to everyone else. He nodded and we both relapsed into a comfortable silence until we arrived at the compound where Banner was already waiting for us. He gave me quite the complicated look but just waved it off. Quite the understanding man. He was the most level-headed person in any room he found himself in, which was something I respected about the man. Glad to see you're back from your sabbatical. He chuckled at my words. As if you gave me a choice, he said. I might not have given him one, but the decision to come back was one he made without any input from anybody. In other words, he wanted to be here. The reason why didn't matter. Decisions. My recent decision might have been made in haste and unbiased curiosity, and the results were something I wholly accepted. The changes were mostly unknown, and I had to do a few mental exercises to make sure no mini Ultron devil was neatly tucked away somewhere inside my head. Maybe I should do a training montage, but that would be highly destructive, and I can't use the compound or anywhere because I don't want to end up killing everyone. Apart from the obvious boost to my abilities, I haven't been using the Mind Stone all that much, as I had restarted the data compilation on it. Maybe this is a nice time to actually work out, and who else is more suitable for highly destructive training practices than God's wrath himself? Banner, I called out to him. I need a favor. Well, it kind of goes both ways, so it's not really much of a favor. Sure, what do you need? I need both your help. He looked at me skeptically and asked with dread creeping in his tone. Me and whose help? You and Hulk's, obviously. Are you? He stopped himself from lashing out and took in a deep breath and then turned around and started walking away, which made me smile as he didn't reject me. Hope you have parts to spare, he said. Degree. Chapter 43. Training montage. Though he was aware of it, Vision's stunt in the meeting was under the scrutiny of a lot of influential people in different circles of life. Those who wielded real power were suddenly cautious of the changes the new member of the Avengers would bring upon his arrival, while others merely scoffed at the naive words of a robot whose only knowledge was the accumulated information derived from a Google search engine. Sublime frowned as he remembered what had transpired in the meeting he had conventionally not attended due to the overwhelming psychic presences that had shrouded the entire vicinity where the meeting was held. Though he was immune against such tricks, he was not in any way allowing himself to be perverted in such a sickening manner by telepaths. If the president is still on the corner about making the decision after the outcome of that farce, then we just have to give him a little nudge. He spoke into the phone lodged against his ears. Norman's project is under heavy pressure from the government after Ross' death and the nature of the experiments known. Don't worry about it. Even if he fails, we still have Trask and Buckman. He listened to the other voice coming through the speaker on his ears and hummed in agreement with some words said or just remained silent. After ending the call, his once impassive face morphed into a scowl for a brief moment before he schooled them back to its normal charismatic smile. Since I can't get rid of him, I'll just have someone else do it for me for free. Saying that, he rang a specific number and waited a few seconds before it was picked up. Hello, Mr. Buckman. Degree. Vision POV. The place I took Banner to was a deserted area where we could both exercise with less restraints to ourselves. Honestly, I was quite eager to see how I stack up against the Hulk in a brutal slugfest. If we were to be grouped by specific definitions, then I would be a hack-style character that was at the peak of a centered field, and mine would be my energy manipulation that allowed me to do a lot of things like telekinesis, technopathy, light manipulation, and host of many new things I could do. Unlike my intended thoughts, Pietro and the all-too-excited Davis had managed to convince me to bring them along, and since Wanda was busy with Laura, I didn't need to carry her along too. So how are we doing this? I just need to Hulk out. Banner was still a bit apprehensive, and rightfully so, since he was unsure how strong my claims of being able to keep him at bay should he go on a rampage stood. Well, that, and I also convinced him not to tell Natasha or anyone else for that matter what we were about to do. The last thing I needed was a worried audience when doing what I had in mind. Well, Banner, I am going to attack you and then proceed to test my strength against an angry Hulk if that's what you are asking. Test. Quite the word you are using there. He chuckled and rubbed his hands together as if he was feeling cold. That's what we are doing, so I guess it fits. Pietro and Davis were quite off the distance, watching with rapt attention at our every motion. How about we start? Wait dash before he could say anything else, a blast struck his chest and threw a long distance away till he was a tiny dot in normal eyesight. I watched with little amusement as I finally saw the Hulk transforming for the first time in front of me, muscles growing absurdly large and fast with his skin changing colors just as fast if not faster. He landed on the ground, fully transformed in a hulking green of insurmountable rage, and even with over 500 meters of distance between us, his eyes were firmly locked to my form. With a loud boom that raised a cloud of dust, he quickly closed the distance in one leap. All done in the space of a few seconds. Threat identified, target, Hulk. Activating laydown protocols designed for the Hulk. Let's see how I fare against the real thing. He was up in front of me in the blink of an eye, with his fist already smashing towards me. I threw a fist of my own, multiplying my base strength and increasing its density and also covering the entire arm with a repelling barrier. The dunes of sand between us was cleared away as our fists connected with each other and I actually staggered back a few steps. I could already feel the Hulk's rage increasing by the moment and blanketing tens of kilometers from our focus point. The feeling was further boosted when he saw I could actually withstand his punch and the grin he sported was not one of comfort. Nevertheless I was far from being afraid. Because just like the Hulk, I had an emotional multiplier of my own, and not only that, with my control of my body's biomass and density, I could match him punch for punch unless he started breaking his dreaded limits. Despite the rage he was emitting, the killing intent he exuded was at an all-time low, not even compared to what he showed during the Battle of Sokovia, which led me to believe that the Hulk really was increasing his sentience based on Banner's IQ. He appeared before me in the flash of a second, fist cocked, as he struck from overhead aiming to pummel me down into the ground, but this time I was ready for him. Instead of just applying the repelling field around my arm like last time, I directed it towards the earth and magnified its effect by 1,000-fold, causing the Hulk, who had his fist centimeters away from face, to shoot upwards as the earth rebounded him fiercely, directly in opposition with the force he was carrying. Shooting off a few blasts to annoy him further, I shot upwards towards him, overtaking him easily and then came crashing down on him with my weight increasing by a ton with every centimeter I fell downwards. Pietro might have sensed the danger as he took David and ran them both kilometers away from ground zero, where it looked as if an atomic bomb had been dropped. Chapter 44. Chapter 44. Training Montage 2. Davis watched in shock as the behemoth and the man with a jewel on his head pummeled their way into each other, trading blow for blow with deranged grins on their faces. Though there was no blood, the picture of devastation they painted sent a chill down the spine of the unfortunate watchers. If not for Pietro's quick thinking, they would have turned casualties of a friendly spar. At least one of them would. It must have been his eyes playing tricks on him, or maybe because of the far distance, but he could swear that the Hulk had grown larger than he was before during the start of the fight. Oh, my God. How can they fight like that? Davis exclaimed as he saw them wantonly destroying everything that was unfortunate to be in their immediate environment. I don't know, man. I never knew he was this strong, Pietro said in awe as he watched Vision gave a literal backhand to the Hulk. The Hulk flew for a bit before pausing midair as if held by an invisible wall, and was drawn back from whence he came as if he was put in reverse. They were stunned as Vision's hands grew to a large proportion and slammed the incoming Hulk, resulting in an earth-shattering roar of rage, causing both fighters to switch tempo. In his insurmountable rage, the Hulk looked more jacked up than his previous appearances since forever, and his body was emitting steam as well as veins that creeped all over his strained muscles. He stumped hard on the ground and everything in a 5 kilometers range sank as if drained through a funnel, but Vision remained unfazed as the sands went against the flow and formed a platform for him to stand on, and surprisingly the same also happened with the Hulk. Everything fell silent as the two of them stared at each other, only for the Hulk's eyes to betray confusion as multiple visions started appearing, each identical to the last. Vision. Annoying. Followed by a shout and then a dive towards the nearest iteration of Vision, who surprisingly defended himself for a few seconds before dissipating. Hulk hate Vision's trick. The multitude of Visions chuckled at the simplistic brute monster, still having more than enough breathing space despite how close to mutual annihilation their battle had been. Well, how about we wrap it up soon? Hulk said nothing except blitzing in the direction of the Vision, who said that and ran through him unobstructed. He shifted his body just the split moment before he touched the ground, changing the direction of his rebound. He grunted in annoyance as he felt the annoying pull from the earth, but his pride would not let him succumb to something as simple as an increased gravitational pull. Vision was simply uncontested when it came to manipulating energy to bring about different effects. He wasn't behind the Hulk in terms of physical strength either. Absorbing, redirecting, amplifying, boosting and altering density opened up myriads of ways to contend against the green beast of might. Hulk, finally having enough, brought his hands together in a booming clap that destroyed some of Vision's hard light illusion, emphasis on the hard, and pushed the others back. Vision's true body fizzled into his material form from nothingness, taking the Hulk by surprise as he appeared too close to him, but Vision didn't think too much of it and just placed his hands on the head of the Hulk and said, "Sleep," followed by an upsurge of telepathic wave that immediately assaulted the Hulk and effectively knocking him out. Battle effectiveness against the Hulk, 92%. Throughout the fight, the number had been fluctuating between the lower ends of 80 and the upper level of 90, and before the end of their fight it had started dropping steadily into the 70s after engaging him in a prolonged bout of physical strength. So it was no wonder why it kept on lowering. He had switched to energy manipulation, his specialty, and that was enough for him to level the playing field and started toying around with the Hulk, much to the latter's irritation and anger. I'd admit, that was as much as a workout anyone can get, he said as Hulk's form shifted back to a quivering Banner. Pietro, get over here. Pietro ran over in a gust of wind carrying a stunned Davis who looked as if he couldn't decide whether to be amazed or fearful. Vision's pristine appearance and his earlier savagery painted quite the contrasting picture left the two young men how to exactly feel. We're going back, he said before taking off with Bruce and leaving the two of them there to follow after. The two of them stood there watching Vision disappear into the horizon until they could no longer see him. He's that strong? Both him and Hulk? Davis asked, still in disbelief of the fight he had just witnessed. Pietro looked at him for a second and said, I don't know, man. I mean, I've always known this was strong and I've seen the Hulk fight, but that's just... Come on, let's go. He grabbed Davis and ran a straight line towards compound. Degree. 30 minutes after they left, a huge sleek black jet landed in the middle of the desert and from it alighted a few people dressed in specialized suits. Oh damn. You're not going to believe this. Check. Logan whistled as he scanned the area of destruction that Storm. His nose twitched for a few moments and so did Hank, but unlike the former, Hank outright growled before snapping himself out of it. What was that? Aurora asked, noticing the odd behavior of the two of them. Hank frowned as he felt an animalistic sense of danger that still wafted in the air and also the mind-numbing feeling of unwarranted anger. Something fought here. Something incredibly angry, Charles. Whatever telepathic signature you picked up when using Cerebro probably already left. Yeah, Aurora nodded, and if it's a mutant capable of surviving a destruction of this capacity, and also a telepath, he's going to be an absurdly powerful one. Let's just hope whoever he is not of the troublesome ilk. If you can't find anything there, come back. We have more pressing issues to worry about. Charles's voice resounded in their heads, prompting them to give up on their impromptu search and return back to the mansion to figure out a way to tide over the coming storms. Chapter 45, A Tiny Problem 4. Can you just believe me when I say I wasn't trying to steal it? I mean, I was, but I was going to return it later. Scott Lang argued as he found himself restrained in red bindings in his diminutive size. 4. Sam scoffed in ridicule. Yeah, says the guy who did 5 years in San Quentin for corporate larceny. Scott looked offended as he heard the words of the winged man he one-upped in minutes, until he was caught by the scary girl that is. I burgled them. 2. Yeah right. Sam rolled his eyes, not at all amused at Scott. Wanda looked between them, her only curiosity being whether the man was a mutant or the shrinking powers he had was somehow connected to his suit. Hey, look here, I'm trying to change, okay? He grimaced as he saw the questioning eyes of his captors and remembered why he got caught. This is different. I'm trying to save the world. I also said I was going to return it, didn't I? Wanda turned to look at Sam and asked, what are we going to do with him? Sam looked at the device on his arm and replied, Steve will be here soon. Vision is not in the building or else he'd be here already. He then looked at Wanda silently asking if she knew of the elusive Avengers' whereabouts. Wanda only shook her head in a negative reply. Pietro and Davis are not in the base so it's likely that he took them with him. She conjectured. Though he's only met Davis once, he had watched the video when Vision fought and put the brownish-gray Hulk to sleep, and yet he wasn't a fan of any raging Hulk. You know what they could be up to. Probably training. Wanda said. Sam didn't need any more clarification after hearing that. Though he was curious about how they could train a Hulk, he wasn't that curious that he really wanted to know. 3. So, what's going to happen to me? Scott interjected them, feeling frustrated that he couldn't even twitch his limbs despite the fact that he was way stronger than a bodybuilder in his small size. Whatever the girl was using to hold was hella strong. Sam cut him off as he felt his frustration rising with every word left in the man's mouth. Shut up. Scott groaned at Sam's stubbornness. Come on, you know where I live. There's no way I can run even if I wanted to. I really need that tech thingy. 1. What tech thingy? Sam asked, knowing fully well that Scott wouldn't just give it up. Beat. It's a signal decoy. You guys have a few of those, I just need one. The two Avengers looked stunned and looked at the man as if he was an idiot, but before anyone could say anything else, the doors opened and Steve walked in, not looking a bit surprised at seeing the shrunken-sized man in a red blob of energy. This him. Oh my god, it's Captain America. Scott whisper-shouted to himself as he saw the war icon face to face for the first time. Steve looked at Scott and despite feeling a bit weird, he sat down in front of Scott who stood unmoving on a table. I'll get to the point. Why were you trying to sneak inside our base? Okay, first of all, I didn't know it was yours. It was supposed to be an old Stark warehouse according to what I was told. Someone told you to rob us. Sam interjected, catching the slip-up which made Scott pause with a wry smile on his face. Well, the doors opened up again and this time it was Vision in his robotic look and a piece of tech in his hands and little ants running around it. 1. I believe these little guys are your doings. Scott's expression paled as he realized that his little plot had been thoroughly busted. 2. Ants. Steve asked. Yes, Vision nodded. Mr. Lang here can control ants. It's not an inherent power, but one based on technology. He looked at Wanda and signaled her with his eyes which she understood, making her release Scott of her hold. Scott reverted back to his normal size but didn't make any move because he knew he would just be easily put down as long as the Wanda girl was here. So what now? He asked hesitatingly as he was faced with the scrutiny of the Falcon, the scary girl, the good to honest Captain America, and the weird-looking robot dude. 1. Steve and Sam were confused but understandably allowed Vision to do what he wanted. So can you tell us the real reason why you broke into our storage? Steve asked calmly. Scott sighed as he had to convince them from the start again. Listen, I already told you, I need that thing to stop a bad guy. You know how it goes. They all looked at Vision and Wanda because only the two of them had the means to verify whether the man was lying. Wanda would have to be in contact with Scott to ascertain his truth because of her lacking expertise in telepathy and empathy, different from Vision who could directly sense it as broad as day. Well, he's telling the truth. Those words of confirmation changed the atmosphere and opinion of everyone in the room. But before we get into that, I believe it's time we get your own side of the story, Dr. Pym. Oh fuck. Scott cursed, realizing that the heist was now fully busted. The voice that had been shouting at him through the comms even before he landed on the base immediately quieted down. 1. He didn't know how the red weirdly looking guy figured that out, but he knew he just put Dr. Pym in the spotlight of Stark, something he recently became aware of with how the man hated the other's father's guts. Relax, I don't mean anything malicious with that. In good faith, you can take this and leave. Vision handed him the signal decoy despite the confused look on Scott's face. But I'll be visiting in a few hours to understand why Hank Pym made someone else the Ant-Man. Steve and Sam were surprised by Vision's actions, with Sam looking very unsure of the latter's action, but they did nothing and just let Scott go. 1. Thank you.
I'll return this. He took a deep breath and looked at everyone one by one.
Goodbye everyone, Captain America, Falcon, weird scary lady and the weird red dude. Sam scoffed at him while Wanda narrowed her eyes dangerously at him. He was about to shrink down to hightail the fuck out of here, but he stopped as his curiosity got the better of him despite the urging voices coming from his speakers as he turned to Wanda and Vision. Are you guys related? Siblings? Married? I just want to say that red suits both of you. He immediately shrank down and called to the nearest winged ant to take him out of there at the nearest speed, luckily escaping by the time Wanda snapped out of it and rage took over. 21. Degree. Chapter 46. Chapter 46. A helping hand. Vision POV. Well, that was as much a surprise for me like it was for everyone else. I'd already put a tag on him and Hank Pym during my search for likely recruits, allies and potential enemies, but he wasn't that much of an importance if I were to be blatantly logical. Well, not as much as the Pym particles were. Not like I hated the dude or anything, none of that, but he wasn't actually a priority I needed to keep an eye on. And I also didn't remember much about his movies or even his comics for that matter. The only I kept a ping on was if words started going around about a supposedly Ant-Man so I'd know of his emergence. After Scott left, Banner woke up and gave me the stink eye and promised me he would never agree to a spar with me as long as he was in control. Davis, being the crazy one, was a lot happy about the prospect of his potential after seeing my fight against Banner, and it was only after I explained the need for a supervision during his transformation did he dial down his excitement. I was of the mind to build something like an emotional inhibitor for Banner, but I later decided against it as it wouldn't do him any good since I wanted him to strive for symbiosis with the Hulk, and further suppressing his latter half would do no one any good. It was also quite funny when I no longer was the only one subjected to Laura's intense stares, as she found her second target in Banner, but unlike how she did with me, she didn't approach him for some reason. Right now I was in Dr. Hank Pym's house with Pietro and Laura, who agreed to come with me after I had jokingly asked. Her mother was rightfully anxious, but I assured how we were doing nothing dangerous and just paying a visit before she finally calmed down, before entering the geek zone with the now sober Banner, who she instantly recognized. Cozy home you have here, Dr. Pym. I was using my human appearance this time since I felt they'd be more receptive to it. Appearance does matter, you know. Seated across me was the wizened Hank Pym, his daughter, Hope, and the new Ant-Man behind him. Well, it used to be a lot cozier. He snorted. I don't know if that was a jab directed at me or someone else, but I wasn't commenting on it. I believe introductions are in order. I'm Vision, and these are Pietro and Laura. I introduced myself and the two young guns by my side. Both his and Rose's eyes drifted to Laura before a frown marred their faces. You taken children now? I chuckled as they both flinched as Laura growled at them with her claws bared. She's had a troubled past, and as you just figured out, she doesn't like being called a child. I said and tapped Laura's shoulders to make her stop, which she did, and retracted her claws. A mutant. I didn't answer the question since I had no reason to. I looked at Pietro, who was just looking around until he caught my eyes and shrugged. I'll take a look around. I rolled my eyes as he left the house to run around the neighborhood just to find something to do for the next minute or two until the discussion got serious. Why are you here? I don't remember ever hearing the Avengers ever conducting an interrogation on civilians. Hank Pym said as he relaxed into his chair while Rose and Scott appeared tense. Nothing so crass, I assure you. I'm only here to ascertain the veracity of your protégé's words. Hope scoffed under her breath, making me realize that she still hated Scott quite a bit at this time. I don't believe the Avengers have it in them to perform corporate espionage. He chuckled dryly. And I don't believe for a second that you're here to lend a helping hand from the good of your heart. Oh, far from it. They all seemed surprised at my quick admittance, but I just continued on. The reason I'm here is because prior to your little BNE, Darren Cross, your former protégé revealed that he had found the key to revolutionizing the arms market, more so than Stark ever did, so obviously I got a little curious. Though this news only got to a certain circle, I have my ways around these things. I don't consider myself a genius in many things, but the timing of his heist on our base and the news does put a lot of things in question. What do you want from us? This time it was Hope who asked. Well, nothing much, as well as your father's assistance. So you don't plan to help. Do you want me to help? She fell silent and looked at her father, who had a distressed look on his face while Scott just looked lost. Hank hated Stark and S.H.I.E.L.D. and anyone affiliated with them due to their past betrayal, but I wasn't here to discuss that. I've scanned all the digital files in this house and not one of them contained his formula, which meant it was all on his head. I wasn't that keen on getting the Pym particle at all costs since I easily could if I wanted, even without any of them knowing, but my goal here was to have a connection with them, even if it meant nothing down the line, which I doubt it would. What do you want from me? Hank Pym asked. Like I said, nothing much. Your assistance will be greatly needed if I require your expertise, but until then, I'm only here to hear from you what's going on. It wasn't exactly a lie per se, but it wasn't a full truth either. So this is a business. Why are old men this cranky and self-important? I just said I don't need anything substantial from him and he's still probing. I'm not giving you my research if that's what you're after. I scoffed at his words. I don't need the PIM particles to crack nanotechnology. Vibranium was already coming a long way there. It isn't called the most versatile metal on Earth for nothing. The uses were just too many that not even I had figured out all of them. Trust me, if I were greedy towards your life's work, I would have gotten my hands on it by now. But you still haven't given a concrete reason why you're here, haven't I? I believe my reason for coming here couldn't be clearer. They looked confused, so I clarified further for their understanding. Do you want my help? Degree. Chapter 47. Chapter 47. Corporate espionage at its finest. I had a feeling that, sooner or later, something was about to blow up, and since this was Marvel, yeah, that means every Tuesday. As much as Hank Pym didn't trust me, he actually relented to accept my help just when Darren Cross arrived at his house. It was actually funny seeing them holding their breaths the entire time Darren Cross was here and couldn't believe their eyes when the man didn't even notice their presence. A little hard light manipulation and the man thought he was alone with Hank Pym and a neighbor who came over for the baseball game. I could feel that he wanted to kill Hank Pym then and there, but a little nudge from me was all that was needed for him to scrap that plan. I put the thought that it'll be much better if Hank Pym lives to see everything he's ever cherished be completely taken by Cross and then die. Normally I'd be done with something like this, but the call was Hank's to make. He still wanted to go the route of corporate sabotage and have Scott steal the yellow jacket, but it was a little boring for me, so I decided to add a little spice. Wouldn't it be better for him to lose everything he's ever worked for on the day he thought he'd finally make it to the top of the world? It only took a few minutes for the database of Cross Technologies to be as open to me as Hell's Gate is to a sinner. It was filled with all the illegal protocols the man had taken in his endeavor to perfect his own version of the PIM particles. The database of Cross Technologies was quite secure due to the high number of cyber attacks they get in a single day, and if I had tried hacking it then no doubt they would have been alerted, but I'd fractioned a part of my mind into a few kilobytes of data and filtered myself into their internet connection, and from there I download a larger part of my consciousness that was sufficient for the task into their software as cache data and went unhindered from there. So how are we going to do this? An all too excited Scott asked. I'll get you inside without anyone knowing, and all you have to do is get the yellow jacket out of there as fast as you can. Pietro will clear out the civilians in the event that a fight breaks out. I explained to them while slowly drinking the tea the old man had been so gracious to make for me. I managed to pick up on the range of frequencies he used in controlling the ants, but I wasn't able to find out how he had interwoven them to form some sort of imperial language that the ants couldn't reject. Well, I'll crack it soon, but I wasn't interested in it. And what will you be doing? Hope asked with apparent skepticism. Me. I pointed to myself then shrugged. I promised Laura's mother that she won't be fighting, so I'll be on babysitting role, I'm afraid. But don't worry, I have the entire building under watch. Nothing can get past me without me knowing as long as I'm watching. She didn't argue too much left for the company since she had to welcome some big hots and potential buyers. How about we get this quickly sorted out so everyone can go home early? Hank grunted, cursing under his breath in incomprehensible words while Scott looked I could feel Laura's eagerness rising, but I only shook my head at her and doused any bubbling excitement she was feeling. It irked me a little how much she liked fighting, which she actually didn't. It was more like her body's natural reaction to any visible conflict. It was an animalistic tendency that I wanted her to gain control over. Logan suffered the same thing along with his brother, Victor Creed, which made them quite the bloodthirsty duo during their younger years. To satiate their thirst for battle was also the reason why they scripted to fight in the World War. It only got better for Logan after he had his adamantium implant, which dulled his animalistic side quite a bit, but not completely. I received a status update request from Steve along the way to Cross Technologies, which I replied to give him the heads up of what was about to happen. So how do I get in? Scott asked as we parked in front of the huge building. Easy, we walk in. They were all stunned, and before any of them, Hank and Hope, could voice their objection, I was already inside the building after going through security with Laura without it triggering a beep. Get moving, I said, and made my way towards the room for the secret presentation. It was obvious that the Yellow Jacket presentation was something only a few knew of, so the rest of the people here were for the unveiling of other projects his group had completed. How did you do that? I heard Hope's voice in my head as Laura and I calmly walked behind Darren Cross as he talked to some key figures, and a few of their identities were interesting to say the least. I hacked into your company's systems. That's also how I included both mine, Laura's, and Pietro's invitation in their registry. I answered nonchalantly as we entered the dark room with little lights before Cross started his presentation. I have to give it to the guy that he definitely had a sense of aesthetics, because the Yellow Jacket's design looked good. Somewhere during the middle of Cross' presentation, I became aware that I was being observed, which shouldn't have been possible since apart from not using my real human face, I was in a psychic zone that diminished any precognitive senses that focused on me or in the perimeter of the zone. It made people naturally forget my presence, making me easily blend into the background. The only way someone can intently look at me was if they were immune to this level of telepathy. Without giving away that I was aware of their stare, I subtly registered the number of presences here with only my telepathic senses and found that the owner of the stare was quite subdued as opposed to the rest here. I looked through the cameras here and saw that it was some middle-aged man. Crossing his face through the registry of this event, I found out that he was called Jonathan Drain, no records whatsoever. Most likely a fake identity. I refocused my attention to Darren Cross, who was about to have his life's work stolen before his eyes and the eyes of his buyers. Gentlemen, I give you the Yellow Jacket. The toy-sized yellow arm suit was revealed while inside a reinforced glass tube that was protected by lasers blocking the only open vent that was connected to it. I knew he was hoping Scott Lang was trying to steal it, and he'd already taken countermeasures to make sure that the smaller man couldn't escape. Under the astonished gaze of everyone, including Darren Cross, something like a fly hit the suit and it fell down the tube it came up on. Darren was quick to tap a few buttons and had a small smile on his face that was threatening to burst out as he waited expectantly for the now closed-off tube to bring the Ant-Man suit back up. The audience calmed down since Darren looked as if he knew what was going on, but after a few seconds the room slowly became awkward as the man started breathing roughly and his face turned ashen as he frantically tapped on the tablet in his hands. No, 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 this can't be happening. He muttered chaotically to himself, which affirmed the audience that something had gone majorly wrong. While some didn't see it due to how fast it happened, some with more acute eyesight caught the man-like tiny shadow that grabbed the yellow jacket under the microscope. As they were about to leave, Darren pulled out a gun and pointed it at his former mentor, Hank Pym. It was you, wasn't it? He's still in the building and there's no way he can escape. It got boring pretty quick, right? She simply said. She really was a person of few words. Degree. Chapter 48. Chapter 48. Disguises 4. Unsurprisingly, the first person to sneakily leave the room was the so-called Jonathan Drain, so naturally he had my full attention. Come on, let's leave. I tugged at Laura and we left the room. Before we left, I sent a telepathic burst that shut down all of Darren's cognitive functions, effectively knocking him out as well as everybody else in the room, except for the stunned Hank Pym. While I didn't have any need for entertaining this as long as I did, I can't deny that I also got something from it. All data pertaining to the yellow jacket have been successfully downloaded. 2. Notice, initial scan of the shrinking particles formula used for the yellow jacket shows slight miscalculations in respect to its effect on biological neurons. Well, it was an imperfect version of the original Pym particles, so no surprise that his was lacking. Darren Cross will wake up to the worst day of life as he would be facing a life sentence behind bars. If any single one of his contacts try helping him out, well, there's always room for more in prison. 4. My work with Hank is done and it'll be up to him, or Scott even, to decide whether they want to work with me or not. I can even throw a freebie after fully understanding how the Pym particles work and tackle quantum diving just for the sake of it. 1. I believe this is where we make our acquaintance, Mr. Drain. The man in question appeared spooked due to how Laura and I appeared out of thin air as he was trying to get into his car and leave in haste. Who are you? Oh, he was good, definitely good, with the way he totally acted as if this was his first time seeing me, as if he had not been paying the most attention to me throughout the duration of the presentation. True. How negligent of me. My name is Vision. I would like to address you as Mr. Drain, but I think we both know that name is fake. He fell silent as he looked at both me and Laura, the former feigning in his eyes gone only to be replaced with an underlying seriousness. What do you want from me? He asked. I looked at Laura and shook my head as I could see her relaxing as she saw that the other party no longer appeared hostile. If it wasn't for the time I spent copying Natasha to a T, I too as well would have been ignorant of the faux pretense his posture suggested. Nothing much, I assure you. I waved my hands in a nonchalant way to show how little my inquiry mattered. I just want to know who you are affiliated with. His face scrunched up in confusion as he heard my question. I don't understand. You are a mutant, aren't you? I just want to know who you're with. The moment those words left my mouth, he immediately attacked by trying to drive a roundhouse kick to my head in advantage of our close distance. To his shock, the kick stopped just a few centimeters from my face, which was when Laura sprung into action, at least before I stopped her. You are not fighting under my watch, young lady. Not when I promised your mother you won't. 2. What? His eyes widened in shock as he saw that but was quick to draw back his legs after feeling that he could take them back but not forth. Who are you? His eyes betrayed the wariness he felt, and I could feel his apprehension rolling out in waves as he looked at me and Laura again, eyes widening a bit in recognition as he saw the two-bladed claws slowly retracting back into the latter's hands. 2. Like I said, my name is Vision, and I believe you still haven't told me your name. The police were already coming to apprehend Darren Cross, and I could feel his apprehension growing as the sirens got louder. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you mine, he said. Not even a fake name. Will that work? I chuckled and shook my head lightly. No, it wouldn't. Laura looked between the two of us with confusion on her face at how civil our conversation was despite him trying to attack me. 1. And trying to steal Darren Cross research files too. Now that got a more prominent reaction out of him. I'd felt a bug when I was digging through the company's servers, and without thinking too much I assimilated it and resumed my work, and it wasn't until he left the presentation room did I feel a receiving signal coming from his pockets, so I followed him. Not to mention that I had a few hunches of who he might really be, but I couldn't be sure unless he admitted it. I chuckled as he got into a fighting stance once again, but given how close the police were in arriving, I decided on getting this over with. The panic in his eyes flared out and wide as he found out that all his movements were restricted, and before he could do anything, my hands landed on his chest, and using the Mind Stone, I had wanted to break his psychic barrier but ended up breaking something else, her illusion. 1. As if a trail of dominoes, both the suit he wore and his skin rose and fell until what was in front of me was a blue-skinned woman with red hair and yellow eyes. 9. Raven Darkholm. I muttered to myself under my breath, which she heard and fought more violently, not at having her identity revealed, but her name, which was somewhat understandable as very few people knew her, and even fewer knew her real name. 3. I guess this is the end of surprises for today. 2. Degree. Chapter 49. Chapter 49. Her choice. Raven, commonly known as Mystique, looked at the man who somehow had nullified her shapeshifting with a single touch with fear creeping into her body. You know that I can sue you for sexual assault, right? She said with a chuckle at the confused face he made, which slowly morphed into a humorless realization. Can this be counted as your naked body? Vision was genuinely confused, as this was something that had generated a lot of curiosity among common folks in his former world. Raven, on the other hand, was a little lost on how to react when faced with such a genuine question, but she still answered nonetheless. Yes. Oh. Vision slowly retracted his hands, and with it their little banter died, replacing the atmosphere with its previous solemnity. Ms. Raven, if you're here, then am I right to believe it was on Magneto's orders? She didn't know why, not even sure if it was because of the powers he used, which she had no idea of what they were, but everything about the man calling himself Vision made her instinctually nervous. She shook her head at his question. No, he doesn't know I'm here. She had no idea why she answered him, but she just did. He was that scary. She didn't know how he knew about her and Magneto, but she didn't care much about it. All that was on her mind now was to escape. In Vision's mind, he was running likely scenarios and events in the likelihood that he apprehends Raven here and now. He knew for a fact that Magneto will be forced to move if that happens, and with the way things were at the moment, a mutant's act of terrorism was the last thing anyone wanted. Anyone that wasn't the government, that is. Raven looked at him in surprise as she felt the hold he had placed on her disappear, and she could escape now. But she wasn't foolish enough to believe she could if he doesn't want it to happen. Why? Though ambiguous, they both understood what she was asking. It's nothing complicated. You've been keeping a low profile for years now, according to what I know. And I believe no one wants a mutant scuffle when the government is against you now more than they've ever been. Her form shifted to a middle-aged woman with blonde hair in a suit, and the moment she did that, he ran a scan of her present appearance and actually got a ping this time. Bayville High. Huh. It looks like this persona of hers was a principal at Bayville High, which was coincidentally where the kids from Xavier's went to school. Is this one of those times when she went on her own, or is she still a follower of Eric? Is that your way of saying you are against the Accords? In a way, yes. Let's go, Laura, he said to the girl who was quietly beside him the entire time, and just that moment a boy appeared beside him in a gust of wind, surprising Raven once again. The three of them disappeared before her eyes, which astounded her even more as she couldn't figure out what kind of ability Vision had. Degree. Vision POV. I kept the meeting with Mystique to myself because there was no need for the others to know. Seriously, there was no point in it. The only reason I even pursued it was because I wanted to know who was involved, and if not for that little hiccup that happened when I tried reading her mind, I would have just infiltrated her thoughts and left. I knew either Scott or Hank would reach out to me soon, so there was no need for me to hang around or tell them I was leaving. Right now, I was about to do something I've been putting off because of the Accords, and since it was already underway, I pretty much knew those who were for it or not and those still on the bench. Davis was with Banner and Sarah, the duo running tests on him after he agreed to their requests, and the only two people with me were Wanda and Laura, both for reasons known only to them. What are you doing? Wanda asked after seeing me pull holograms of the Avengers and running some specs on them. Working on outfitting the team, I said as I pulled up the schematics for the first person, Natasha. The costume for the Black Widow was pretty simple and easy on the eyes. First things first was a complete vibranium overall. Thankfully, a lot of vibranium was salvaged from Ultron's Meteor City, so I had a lot to work with, and then coupled with the sizable amount of raw adamantium ore that I got from the facility, outfitting everyone, even Stark, was a piece of cake. It was a stroke of good luck for me that Stark was someone competent and reliable when it came to technology, since the entire compound was filled with them, so there was no need for me designing and building a 3D printer or a weaver for the material I was sewing. Even me, she asked as she saw the specs of her profile. And you got my measurements correct? I stopped for a moment before continuing with the same pace and answered, yes. And if you really want to know, I know the measurements of every single member of the Avengers. She grinned and just nodded to herself, focusing her attention to the detailed parts of her data. Do you have any ideas for me? She asked. I finally looked up at her, and then at the image before replying to her. Well, red suits you, so the color scheme stays the same. You don't need anything in terms of defense or offense, so most things stay the same. Honestly, you and Banner are receiving the least upgrade. Well, Banner isn't receiving anything actually, since he has the perfect defense. Yours is just mostly cosmetic. What of me? We both turned to Laura, who didn't see her profile amongst the others. You're want to fight? I asked, even though I already knew the answer, and just as I hoped, she nodded. Well then, this is a brainstorming session, so what kind of upgrades do you want? Degree. Chapter 50. Chapter 50. Finishing touches. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. After the other members of the team returned from their little reconnaissance mission, Xavier called them all to his office to inform them of the latest change of plans in the government hierarchy. So they got owned by a robot? Ain't that hilarious? Logan chortled, causing him to choke on his beer. Be that as it may, at least we now know which side the Avengers most likely stand on. Charles added. Ororo looked at Charles and asked, should we talk to them? The reason she asked was that she knew more than anyone, even Charles, what would happen once the laws were made public. Charles fell silent, and so did the others, because they knew this was more serious than they were comfortable admitting. What about this Vision guy? We know the Avengers are not for the Accords, but we also know that they can't oppose the government so forwardly. That guy stunt is bound to bite them in the ass later on. Those old fucks can be pretty tenacious when they want to be, Logan said with no small amount of irritation in his voice. SI, and the Fantastic Four. Hank interjected. When groups were taken into consideration, the Fantastic Four were always the odd one out, given that they were the only ones who had a legal contract with the government, whatever that entailed. Charles shook his head. I don't know. There was something interfering with the psychic energy in the room, probably Reed Richards, but let me guess, vision. Hank speculated, seeing Charles's hesitation. It's just something off about him the first time I saw him on TV. Probably some wild instincts, but that was enough to make me quite curious about him. He's supposed to be an self-evolving android, right? Charles tapped his temple as he remembered what he felt when he was in the presence of vision. It was like a bottomless gulf threatening to suck in all life or anything that comes too close. That doesn't sound too user-friendly. Scott quipped. Huh, no shitting, kid. I don't think we need to worry that much since he's with the Avengers. Need I remind you what Chuck said when he first tried gauging the Hulk? Or Thor? Logan reasoned. Charles let out an embarrassed laugh at Logan, pointing out one of his flaws. He wasn't one to judge someone on appearances or how they felt, but their actions instead. Otherwise he wouldn't have cared for people like Kurt and Logan, with how the former looked demonic and the other was just a straight-up murdering beast in human form.
But then again, first impressions were important when getting acquainted with someone.
So,
Are we talking with them or not? A very question again. Do we really need to? Hank answered before Charles could.
no, we don't. But we continuing to go alone will prove to bite us way sooner than we expected. We're exposed to the whims of the government, and should they prove hostile, any act of resistance from us will be seen as terrorism. It's fucking complicated. Politics, I mean. He groaned in irritation, an expression mirrored perfectly by the others. Degree. Vision POV. Getting Natasha's, Wanda's, and Barton's new getup was a piece of cake, and it also helped that I could control every single piece of machinery here, so it took less time than it would have if I had done it simultaneously. It also was kind of funny and a little embarrassing for me, bearing all the teasing comments and innuendos from Wanda about me knowing her proportions and bust size, which I was made aware of had increased prior, hence her amusement. It is very refreshing seeing her breaking out of her shell and expressing herself once again without the guilt of her past weighing down on her. This way the future menace known as the Scarlet Witch was going farther from nuking all mutant kind across the multiverse. Right now, I was putting the final touches to Laura's design, which was an all-black leather suit with retractable protrusions for her claws. The suit also functioned as a medium for echolocation due to its vibranium properties, which heightened her senses to a whole new level. Seriously, the uses for vibranium are almost endless. For Steve, the suit had a darker shade like the one in the Infinity War movie, with all the goodies that came with it and more. With his natural strength, along with the seamless lining I did with the adamantium mixed with a little vibranium to make it flexible to the point that Steve wouldn't feel it that much, the suit increases his physical properties a notch higher, and he was like a mini Hulk with it. His shield also had a little upgrade apart from the one Stark did that let it return back even when stuck. I added a photon casing around it that charged it up, and with a strong enough throw, it became less of a frisbee and more of a cleaver. A photo adamantium cleaver. Noise. And while doing this, I also cracked the PIM particles, quite easily if I do say so myself. Adding that as an accessory to the suit and making it Pro Max adaptable to the point that it could be fitted into a piece of jewelry or a keychain was the highlight of my little assignment. As for the Falcon, his went through a complete overhaul as I had to build it from scratch, and what became the outcome of it was a very sleek red and white jacket that housed all the components of his suit. The bulk was greatly reduced, and when retracted, the wings could cut through reinforced carbine glass if he used enough force and switched with the adamantium parts for the wings, which was mostly the outer edge, and he could make it a little blunt if he wanted to help with his flying. Well, he was the pilot, so he'll figure the controls out. An explosion just happened at Oscorp. A few people of interests are currently at the vicinity of the explosion. Oh, would you look at that? Goblin trouble. Degree. You can find plus 10 chapters ahead in my Patreon. Patreon.com/QuackVader. Comment. Vote. 2 left.